What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Game Night YouTube channel. In today's video, guys, I am going to teach you how to play UnderQuest. That is right, guys. We're going to get into all of the nitty-gritty, all of the rules and details of how to play this amazing solo player tabletop dungeon crawling game, and I'm going to show you all the components. We're going to go over each of the decks of cards. We're going to go over all of the dice and the little pieces that come with the game, and we're also going to go over each of these decks of cards individually. I'm going to teach you all the rules for all the various card types in the game, how combat works, how exploration works, and just how every rule in the game functions. So that way, by the end of the video, you know exactly how to play the game. I will mention too, right out of the gate here at the start of the video, this is not going to be a playthrough of the game. I have many playthroughs already on the channel, so be sure to check those out so that you could see all the rules that you're going to learn in today's video in action, in real time, and that's really going to help put all the pieces of the puzzle together so you can really see it in action. So this video is going to serve as a detailed rules video where we go over all of the rules in the game in detail. So let's go ahead and hop into it, guys. So the first thing we're going to start out with are the components. So as you can see, I've got all the components laid out on the table here, at least most of them. So we've got the box for the game here, beautiful artwork on the box, really sturdy box here. It gives you like a list of a little bullet point list on the back of some features for the game. Really, really cool stuff. So we're going to set this off to the side over this way. And then we're going to go over the rest of the components. You'll notice I've got a couple play mats here for the game. Now, I will mention you don't need the play mats in order to play UnderQuest, but they help out a lot to keep everything nice and neat, and it shows you where all of the different decks of cards go and where your different tokens and stuff go. Same thing for this mat over here for your character cards and all your little token slots here and everything, and your inventory space. It just helps keep everything nice and neat, especially with a game like this that has so many different decks of cards and little components and stuff, little tokens. So again, you don't need these, but I do highly recommend using these to help kind of streamline the experience when playing UnderQuest. So let's go over each of the components. So we're going to go over the little components up this way. First, we've got a bunch of tokens. So the game is going to come with several of these health tokens here that have a 5 printed on them. And of course, you can use a single health token with a 5 on it to represent 5 health tokens if you'd like. We're going to set this over this way. We've also got a set of health tokens here. The game comes with 29 of those. You've got some grit tokens. You're going to use these in combat mainly to deal extra damage in combat. You've got some poison tokens that you'll use to track how much poison you have on your character. You get some gold tokens as well to keep track of how much gold you have. These are curse tokens. You've got experience point tokens that you'll earn whenever you defeat monsters and level up, or use them to learn skills. We've got some ration tokens here, which is basically food that you'll use to feed your character. And then we've got some quest tokens. We've got the combat quest tokens, nature quest tokens, mystic quest tokens, and the wealth quest tokens. And I'll explain in more detail what all of these tokens are used for. Also, you're going to get some dice in the game. So you're going to get 3 of these blue 6-sided dice that you'll use to keep track of your agility, brawn, and mind stats on your character cards. You'll also get a little red d6 over this way that you're going to use to track the morale of any of your companions that you might pick up along the way during your adventure. And you're going to get 2 of these red d6 to roll for all kinds of different roles in the game. Basically all the combat rolls, skill checks, and things like this. To craft potions also, you'll use these dice to roll, so you get a couple of those. And you're going to get some cubes to track some different stats on the stat tracking cards that come with the game. Now, I have a couple more over here off camera that I'll share with you guys. So these cards here can be used in place of the tokens. So instead of tracking your health with these health tokens or tracking your grit and poison, etc. with the tokens, you can use these tracker cards are here to track them. So you see you've got rations, gold, poison, curses, health, grit. It even has your agility, brawn, and mind stats that you could place these dice on these little spots right here on this card to track those. So you could use those instead of tracking with the tokens on the playmats. So that's an option for you. The game, of course, comes with these. So again, you're not going to need the playmats if you want to go this route. There's only a couple of these that I actually personally use whenever I'm playing the game. One of them is this one over here. This will help you track how much damage you're doing of the different types of damage. So you've got normal damage, fire damage, ice damage, holy damage, and then how much armor you have. And I'm using these little clear cubes here to track those stats. Also, there's an encumbrance tracker to show how much weight you're holding on your character. So I've got a couple cubes to track that. I like to put one of them, say you can hold up to 10 weight. I like to put the red one on the 11 to kind of block it off to show that I can only go up to 10, and then I use the silver one to track how much weight I have. Of course, you can do it however you like. That's just how I prefer to do it. And then there's a morality tracker down here at the bottom, and I use this little white cube to track my morality, whether I go into positive morality or negative morality. And of course, we'll discuss all of those mechanics here soon. And the last one that I use is this tracking card down here. It has a spot for your experience that you can track, but I don't actually use this because I like to use the experience tokens whenever I'm playing the game. But what I do use this tracking card for is the enemy health. So I like to slide it under the mat like this to hide the experience point tracker. And then I use this red cube to track how much health the enemy has during battle whenever we're in combat fighting enemies. So those are the two that I use. The game is also going to come with a couple of other little things that I have off camera here. So it's going to come with some extra baggies. There's only one here. I think there's like 3 or 4 extra ones in the box. So you'll be able to house all of the components in the baggies. And there's some extra cubes in here too that you can use for those tracking cards so that you could track your different stats with these extra cubes. So you could totally do that. And if you don't want to use the tracking cubes and cards or the tokens, you can also get your hands on this. So this is going to be sold separately. It's not going to come with the game, but you can buy these separately. And it is a little notepad that is full of these double-sided character sheets. So it's the same thing printed on each side of the sheet, and it has all of the same information here. You could draw like a little picture for your character if you want. You can keep track of all your stats up this way, how much extra damage you do, your defense stat, and then it's got trackers for your health, your grit, so on and so forth. You can write down what your primary hand weapon is, your offhand item, so on and so forth, your spells and skills. So this is kind of harkening back to like Dungeons and Dragons sort of, or like, you know, just any sort of tabletop role-playing game where you track all your stats on like a character sheet. So if you want to go that route, you could totally do that. And you could still use these little tracking cubes to track your stats on this tracking card if you want to. Totally up to you. So you've got a few different options to track your stats in the game. And again, this particular item here is sold separately. But all the other stuff I've showed is going to come with the game. And then last but not least, there is a bonus card that comes with the game. This is Grubrot. This is the final character that's going to be created for the game Ironhelm. So if you own Ironhelm, or if you're thinking about getting Ironhelm, you'll have an extra character to play as in the game with Grubrot. So this is like a cool little promo card that comes with the game as like a little bonus. And then finally, the game comes with this beautiful full color rule book here that has all of the rules in it that we're going to go over in today's video, but they're all right here in the rule book. So if you need to refer to anything in the rule book, it's right there for you. And there's a nice table of contents on the back of it so that you can just go straight to whatever page you need to in order to get to that rule in the rulebook. Cool. So that's all the components that come with the game, other than, of course, all of the cards. The game comes with a bunch of different cards. You've got reward cards, treasure cards, ingredients, trinkets, encounters, enemies, abominations, scourges. You also have a boss deck over this way of 3 bosses. You've got a dungeon deck, and then you've got a few decks over this way. You've got your level trackers, your quest deck, trappings, skills, your characters that'll have your race on one side and the class on the other. You'll also have a deck of familiars, which are like little companions that will join you on your adventure right here. And then last but not least, you have a deck of incantations, which are basically spells. Cool. So that is all of the components for the game. Now we're going to get into how to set up UnderQuest, and we're going to get into how to get your character and everything set up. So the first thing you're going to want to do is shuffle up all of the cards. Now, there are a couple of decks in the game that you're not going to shuffle. One of them is the rewards. So you do not need to shuffle the rewards deck, but the rest of the cards, like the treasure, ingredients, trinkets, and so forth, you'll go through and you'll give all of those a shuffle. And you'll shuffle all of these decks of cards right here. Treasure, ingredient, trinkets, encounters, enemies, abominations, and scourges. Again, you don't have to shuffle the rewards. And over this way, you'll leave all of these alone as well. You won't have to shuffle any of those. You also don't need to shuffle the incantation deck. So it's mainly just from the treasure all the way down to the scourges. You can also leave the bosses as they are as well. The next thing you're going to do is set up your level tracker. So you'll notice that these level cards here will say level 1 at the top of this one, then level 2, and it goes all the way up to level 5. And then you'll have a final 6th card that says, time was your real enemy. You have failed your quest. So if you get all the way down through level 5 of the dungeon and you fail to defeat the boss, then you run out of time and you lose the game. So you're going to keep track of what dungeon level you're on with these dungeon tracker cards. Now, there are a black side to the cards, and then there's a red side to the cards. The red side is whenever you play on a harder mode of the game. So if you want to increase the difficulty of the game, you could play on the red side. Also, the game features a system where once you beat the game and you beat a boss in the game, you can continue on to another adventure, and it's advised that you flip these cards from the black side to the red side on subsequent adventures to add a little bit of difficulty to the game. But typically, you're going to play on the black side of the cards. It's also worth mentioning, too, that UnderQuest is balanced primarily around a single playthrough of the game. But again, it does feature a system where you can continue your adventure moving forward. And as of now, there are plans to release expansions for the game that will allow for more difficult adventures once you continue your adventure past the first one. So keep that in mind moving forward. But it does offer you some added difficulty with the level cards if you flip them to the red side. Cool. So you've got your level trackers set up. You just make sure that you've got them stacked from level 1 down through level 5, and you're always going to start, of course, on level 1 whenever you're beginning the dungeon. The next thing you want to do is set up your quest deck. Now, the quest deck has 6 different quests. It's got quest 1 all the way through to quest 6, and there are 3 cards per quest. So you're going to get 3 level 1 quests, 3 level 2 quests, and so on and so forth. So what you're going to do with these is you're going to separate them out. You'll put all the 3 level 1 quests, then the level 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s in their own piles. And then you can shuffle these up and you'll get a random quest out. So you'll get a quest here. You'll set these off to the side. You'll shuffle these up. You'll get another quest. This is quest 2, so we'll slide it underneath here. And then you're going to go down the line getting a random quest out of each of these quest decks here. And what this is going to do is set up a random unique narrative. So let's get this mixed up. And then finally, we'll get the 6th quest. And your goal in the game, of course, is to try to complete these quests. So let's go ahead and take the rest of the cards and we'll set them back over this way, like so. So like I was saying, your goal in the game is to try to complete all of these quests all the way through to the 6th quest, and then spawn one of these 3 bosses here, either the Death Warden, the Ashworm, or the Heart Thief, and defeat them in order to beat the game. So that is the ultimate goal of the game, and it uses this really neat thematic quest mechanic in order to do that, to propel you through the game with this really neat narrative storyline. So what you're going to do once you have your 6 quests set up is you'll take the first quest card and you'll flip it face up, and then you're going to have that ready to read whenever you're ready to go out on your adventure and start the game. So we'll set that over that way like so. Cool. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you have enough space to set up all of your tokens and your dice. You want to have enough space on the table for all of that. And also for your character, you're going to have enough space on the table to set up your character for their race, class card, and familiar. And then finally, what you want to do is take the dungeon deck here and give it a mix. So we're going to shuffle up the dungeon deck, and you'll have your dungeon deck randomized and ready to go. Cool. The next thing you want to do is create your character. So creating your character in UnderQuest is almost like a really neat mini game in itself. It's almost like a cool little like mini game separate from the actual game, which is pretty cool. There's a bunch of different combinations of characters, dozens and dozens of character combinations that you can create with the current character lineup in the base game of UnderQuest. So let's go ahead and discuss how you set up your character. So let's take a look at these cards. You're going to get 6 of these cards that have a race on one side and a class on the other side. And we're going to go over all of the anatomy of the card here so you know exactly what you're looking at. So we've got the name of the race up at the top. So you've got a Nortian, a Crolling, a Seldoran, an Aquana, a Cremori, and a Yorni. Those are going to be the 6 races that you can play as. Next up, you're going to have a really cool image of your character. And then off to the left, you're going to have some important stats. You're going to have how much health this race starts with. In this case, for the Nortian, he starts with 15 HP. This is how much grit they start with, 6 in the case of the Nortian. And then this is how much weight you can carry. So in the case of the Nortian, 8. So in this case, I would take my red cube here, and I would set it on the 9 to show that I can go up to 8. And then I would use the silver cube to track how much weight I'm carrying. So that's your carry capacity or your encumbrance is 8. Then down below in this text box, you're going to have some more information. You're going to have the special ability of the race card. In this case, for the Nortian, you add 1 damage to all successful attacks against enemies weak to ice. So each of these characters is going to have their own unique ability. Like the Crowling says special ability +1 to all agility checks. Or the Seldoran says special ability, the cost of learning a new skill is reduced by 1. So they each have their own unique special ability that's going to make the character play a little bit differently. And then down below that, you're going to have a bonus item that you start the game with. So with the Nortian here, you start with a random trinket. So you would draw a trinket card from the deck whenever you start the game. If you played as the Crowling, you'd start with a random ingredient. So you'd get to draw an ingredient card. Or if you play as the Aquana, for instance, your bonus item would be 1 ration. So you'd get to start the game with an extra ration token. So again, each of these characters has a random bonus item that you're going to start the game with. That will make the game play out a little bit differently and affect your decisions throughout the game and make each character feel unique. And then finally, down at the bottom, you're going to have your 3 primary stats: agility, brawn, and mind. Now, these 3 stats will affect several different things in the game. Primarily, they will affect how much extra damage you do in combat, depending on what type of weapon you're using. And also, they'll mainly come into play for skill checks. So you're going to roll skill checks throughout the game for various different encounter cards and enemy cards and other things. And you'll want to refer to your stats here in order to determine how much you add to those checks that you take, those skill checks. And we'll get into all that in more detail soon. So you've got agility, brawn, and mind on each of the 3 characters, or each of the 6 characters rather, each of the 6 race cards, and they have a different distribution of stats amongst all the characters, so that way they all feel unique. Cool. So that is the race card. And then on the flip side of all the race cards, you've got the class card. So we'll go over the anatomy of these cards as well. You're going to have the name of the class up at the top of the card: Herbalist, Ranger, Bastion, Conjurer, Savage, and Scoundrel. Those are your 6 races that you could, or your 6 classes rather, that you can choose from. And you're going to have a nice little artwork here that'll show like a table, and it'll have some different items on the table that sort of reflect the type of items that that class would have, which is really neat. So there's a visual representation of the class as well. And then it shows how much starting health you're going to get. So you're going to add this health to the health of your starting race. And we're going to build a character here in a moment so you can see how that plays out. There's also going to be a starting grit for your class. There's a starting gold value and starting rations as well. And then down below in the center of the card here in this bottom section, you're going to see a couple of little purple icons here with a big gray star underneath with some numbers inside. Now, this is bonus damage. This is how much bonus damage you're going to do in combat, depending on how many grit tokens you spend. So you'll see there's one little purple icon here that's representing these grit tokens with the purple icon on them. If you spend 1 grit, you do 2 extra damage. If you spend 2 grit, you do 4 extra damage. And if you spend 3 grit, you do 6 extra damage as an herbalist. And each of these class cards has different values of damage that you'll do depending on how much grit you spend, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 grit. And then down below at the bottom of the card, it's going to tell you what skill you start the game with. So you've got this deck of skills over this way, and the skills are divided up into 3 different types of skills, and those skills will match the 3 different attributes: agility, brawn, and mind, that you have on your race cards. So in the bottom right of those cards, it'll tell you what type of skill it is. So we've got agility skills, we also have brawn skills, and we also have mind skills. And it's probably best to keep all of them sort of together in order. Like I keep all the mind skills together, all the brawn skills together, and all the agility skills together. Just makes it easier to go through the deck and find what you're looking for. So on these race cards, or these class cards rather, you're going to start with particular skills. So in the case of Herbalist, it says that the skill you start with is Herbalism. So you're going to go look for the Herbalism skill. And let's see if we can find it in here. There it is. So you would take the Herbalism skill, and if you're using the playmats, you could place it here on your skill slot. Otherwise, just make sure you have enough room on the table to build your character, and you'd place your skill out on the table. Cool. So that's what that's for. It tells you what starting skill card you're going to get from the skill deck. And then below that on the class card, it'll tell you the skill proficiency of the character. In this case of the Herbalist, it is Mind. Now, your skill proficiency is important when learning new skill cards from the skill deck. If you learn a skill that's within your skill proficiency, it's going to cost you 6 of these experience points in order to learn the skill. So you would have to have acquired at least 6 of these experience point tokens, and then you would discard them in order to learn a skill from the skill deck that is of the same proficiency. So in this case, for an Herbalist, mind skill. So you can learn a mind skill for 6 experience points. If you want to learn a skill that is outside of your proficiency, so in this case, an agility or brawn skill, it would cost you 10 of these experience points. So any skills that you learn that are in your proficiency cost 6. Any that are outside of your proficiency cost 10 experience points. And then finally, last but not least, at the very bottom, we've got the starting trapping that you start with each of these class cards. And for each of these class cards, your starting trapping is going to be a weapon card. So for the herbalist, you're going to start with the worn staff. The ranger will start with the crude sling. The bastion will start with the dull gladius. The conjurer will start with the spell tome. Savage will start with the spiked club. And the scoundrel will start with the rusty dagger. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and get those set up now. So let's go ahead and pick out a race card here. Now, you could do this however you want. You could pick your own race card, your own class card, and choose how you want to build your character, or you can randomize it by shuffling them up and drawing one out at random. It's totally up to you. So just for the sake of this tutorial, let's say we're going to pick a Komori. We'll be a Komori as our race. And then as our class, we'll flip these over and we can pick a class card. And let's just say that we want to go with a scoundrel. We'll be a Komori scoundrel. And then the rest of the cards you can set off to the side, or you can just place them underneath either of the cards like so. Cool. And we're going to go ahead and get their stats set up in just a moment. But before we do that, let's take a look at the familiars, because the familiar is going to be the third card that is integral to creating your character. Now, there are 6 of these familiar cards, and these are like little companions that are going to join you on your adventure right from the start of the adventure, and they'll stick with you all the way through to the very end. And each of these is going to add some stats to your character and have a very unique ability that will make each of them stand out and help you through your quest, and it'll make the game play differently since each of them have such unique abilities. So let's take a look at the anatomy of the familiar cards. You're going to have the name up at the top. You've got the Howl, the Glider, the One-Eyed Toad, the Fink, the Cockeye, and the Moon Rabbit. And then next to the image here of your little familiar buddy, you're going to have some stats that get added to your character. So you're going to have health, grit, and then this little icon right here tells you how much morality you start with on the morality tracker. Now, there are 3 of these familiars that will start you with +1 morality: the Moon Rabbit, the Howl, and the One-Eyed Toad. And there are 3 sort of like evil familiars that will start you with -1 morality: the Glider, the Fink, and the Cockeye. So you would take your cube here for your morality tracker, and you would place it on the tracker equal to whatever it tells you here, whether it's +1 or -1. And your morality will factor in various ways throughout the game, which we'll get into here soon. And then it'll have an ability for your familiar down here in this text box. And again, each of the 6 familiars has their own special unique ability. Down in the bottom left, it'll tell you a random item that you start the game with, very similar to the bonus item that you start with your race card here. So for the Moon Rabbit, you get a random ingredient to start the game. So you would draw an ingredient card and get to add that to your inventory. For the Howl, you get to start with a ration, or with the One-Eyed Toad, you get to start with a random trinket. So again, very similar to the bonus items that you get with your race cards. And then last but not least, down in the bottom right of each of these familiars, it will tell you +1 to a particular stat, whether it's agility, brawn, or mind. And I'll show you how that works soon enough. And each of these has a different stat that it'll add to. 2 of them add +1 agility, 2 of them add +1 to mind, and then the other 2 familiars add +1 to brawn. So let's go ahead and set the familiars over this way. Let's go ahead and pick one, actually. We'll go with the Moon Rabbit. We'll pick the Moon Rabbit. So our character is going to be a Komori scoundrel with a Moon Rabbit familiar. Now let's get all of the stats set up. So I'm going to use the tokens to set up the stats. Again, if you want to use the included tracker cards that come with the game and the cubes, you could totally do that. Or you could use those character sheets that I showed you as well. So you're going to add up the health values on all 3 of these cards. So we've got 13 + 7 is 20 + 4 is 24. So I've got a stack of 20 health tokens here. And then I'm going to add 4 to it. So I'll grab 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now I could use those tokens that have the 5 health on it. It's just a personal preference. I actually like being able to see my full stack of health. That way when I lose health and I discard it off to the side in this pile, I can kind of visually see how much health I have compared to how much I've lost. But if you want to, save on space, you could always use those 5 health tokens as well. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this here on the mat. I'm going to use this section for my health that I currently have. And then anytime I lose health, I'll discard these tokens off into this section of the mat here. Cool. All right, so we get to start with 24 health, and then we've got six grit, plus 2 more grit is going to be 8, and then plus 2 more grit is going to be 10. So then you would take your grit tokens and you get 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And one more will be 10. There we go. And we'll set that right there like so. Cool. And then next, you're going to look at your encumbrance. So we've already set that up. We can hold up to 8 items or 8 weight worth of items. So we can keep track of that on our encumbrance tracker over here. And then next, we're going to see how much gold we start with. We start with 4 gold. So we're going to grab 4 of these gold tokens and set those up here. And then we're going to start with 1 ration. So we'll take 1 ration token and set that over this way. Cool. And then on our moon rabbit, it says that we start with +1 morality. So I'm going to put this cube on the 1 on the morality tracker, like so. Cool. And you can see there's a 0 here. So you can have 0 morality, or you can go up into the positive, or you can go down into the negative on the morality tracker. Cool. Next up, we'll take note of our special ability on our Komori that says we get +1 to all mind checks. So anytime we need to make a mind check in the game, we'll get to add +1 to it. Of course, I'll explain how skill checks work soon. And then the bonus item you get is a random ingredient. So we would take the top card of the ingredient deck and add it down here to our inventory. And then we would set up our stats. So this character is going to have 2 agility. So we're going to set this to a 2. He's going to have 1 brawn. So we'll leave that set to a 1. And then he's going to have 2 mind. So we'll set this die to a 2. Cool. And then on our class card, it says that we start with the skill Shadow, and our skill proficiency is Agility. So I'm going to get all the agility skills here, and we start with the skill Shadow. So we're going to set that here on our skill slot. And then next up, it says that our starting trapping is the Rusty Dagger. So we'll go through the trapping deck, and we'll find the card, the Rusty Dagger. It is right here. And that is going to go in our primary slot over here in our inventory. And I'll go over the inventory here in just a moment as well, once we get completed with setting up our character. And then finally, on the Moon Rabbit, we're going to get a random ingredient. So let's grab another ingredient here, and we'll add that with our fresh blood over this way. And then we get +1 agility. So we can increase our agility stat on our character from 2 up to 3, like so. And there we go, guys. We have completed our character setup. Now, there's one last step that you're going to take whenever you're setting up your character before you head out into the dungeon on your adventure, and that is that you get to take a pit stop at the Lonely Troll Inn. So you're going to go to this inn, the Lonely Troll, and you're going to meet up with the merchant there named Calm, and he will have some trappings available for you to purchase. So let's go ahead and take the trapping deck. Now, the way this works is you're going to take the trapping deck, you're going to shuffle it up, give it a little mix, and then you're going to take the top 5 cards of the trapping deck and lay them out on the table, and that's going to be the available stock, the inventory that Caln has for you to purchase. And oh my goodness, both of those are fantastic. I wish I was actually playing a run right now. So you'll put the top 5 cards out on the table, and then you'll be able to purchase these cards. So let's take a look at the trappings card so that you can know how this works. So of course, you're going to have the name of the card up at the top, Godfrey Spirits. You'll have a nice little artwork of the card, and then you'll have some info over on the left side. This is how much gold the card costs, or how much gold this particular trapping costs. So Godfrey Spirits in this case costs 1 gold. So if you wanted to buy this item, and you do, by the way, this item is insanely powerful, you would spend 1 of your gold tokens in order to purchase that item. Down below it, it'll tell you how much the item weighs. So it weighs 1. So if we were to pick up this item and put it in our inventory, we would increase our encumbrance by 1 on the encumbrance tracker. Also, it tells you what type of item it is. So if it says PH right here, that means it's primary hand. It's a one-handed weapon, and it will go in your primary hand slot in your inventory. If it says OH, it means offhand, and it'll go in your offhand slot in your inventory, which is mostly shields in the game. You'll have those in your offhand slot. If it says BD, it means that it goes on your body. So you'll place that on your body slot right here. If it says HD, that means it goes on your head. You'll place it on your head slot. of course, that's going to be helmets. And if it says AS, that means it's an accessory and it will go in your inventory, and you can just hold as many accessory items as you want. For the other items, primary hand, offhand, body, and head, you can only have one of each of those items equipped at a time. Also, if it says TH, it means that it's a two-handed item or a two-handed weapon. And if you're carrying that, you cannot have an offhand item as well, because of course it's taking up both of your hands. And then down below in the text box, it'll tell you what the card does. So in the case of Godfrey Spirits, discard to restore 3 grit, and then you roll a d6. And if the result is a 1, you gain 1 curse token. So of course, all of the trappings and treasures in the game will have different effects that you'll read and resolve. And then in the bottom left, it'll tell you what type of item it is. In this case, it's a consumable, which means once you use it, it's discarded. If it was a weapon, for instance, like the worn staff here, it'll tell you in the bottom left that it is a weapon. And then it'll tell you the stat that the weapon is attached to, in this case, brawn, and I'll explain soon why that is significant. It's essentially going to affect how much extra damage you do in combat, depending on what that particular stat is. So for instance, the worn staff, since it says brawn in the bottom right, since we have 1 brawn, we would get to add 1 damage to our attacks if we're using that particular weapon in combat. And again, we'll get into more detail about combat later in the video. Cool. Also, if it is in armor, it'll say armor down in the bottom left. Like, let's find an armor. Perfect. Like the bronze helm, it'll say armor down this way. And I think those are the 3 different types. Yeah, consumable, weapon, and armor. Oh, also, you can get accessories as well, like the worn bedroll here. Cool. So what you'll do at this point is you'll spend gold on any trappings that you want to buy. So let's just say in this case, I really want to buy Godfrey Spirits for 1 gold. And I really want to buy the Bitter Remedy also for 1 gold. So I would spend 2 gold right here, and I would give those to Calm. So we'll put those over here in the pile, in the little stack. And then I would get both of these items, and I could add those to my inventory down this way. Then you take any remaining items that you don't want to purchase, and you would shuffle them into the Trappings deck. It's also worth mentioning, too, that you can sell items to Calm. You can sell trappings and treasures, treasure cards to Calm, for 1 gold apiece. And on subsequent runs, you can also buy rations from Calm as well for 1 gold apiece. Cool, so let's go ahead and put him over that way. We'll put the trappings deck there. So now let's take stock of how much weight we're holding on our character. So the Rusty Dagger weighs 1, Godfrey Spirits weighs 1, the Bitter Remedy weighs 1, so that's 3 weight. So we're going to set our cube to 3. But you'll also notice that we have a couple of ingredients over this way. Now, the way ingredients and trinkets are weighed is that each of these essentially weighs half of a weight. So any 2 of them together will weigh 1. So if you've got 2 ingredients, like in this case, that would weigh 1. If you had 2 trinkets, that would weigh 1. If you had 1 trinket and 1 ingredient, that would also weigh 1. So any 2 ingredients or trinkets will weigh 1. So since we've got 2 ingredients here, that's going to add 1 weight. It's also worth mentioning, if you're at, let's say we can hold up to 8 right now with the Kermori. Let's say we were all the way maxed out on 8 encumbrance. You cannot hold 1 trinket or 1 ingredient extra, even though it only technically weighs half of a weight and it doesn't count as a full weight. Once you're at your max encumbrance, you cannot hold any more items, not even a trinket or an ingredient. So that's an important thing to keep note of and keep in mind. So if you ever go over your encumbrance limit, you need to drop items in order to get back down to it or under it. So that way you're not over encumbered. Cool. So we've got our character set up and ready to go, guys. We are ready to head out into the dungeon with our Kermori Scoundrel and the Moon Rabbit Familiar. So very cool little, like I said, almost like a little mini game in itself, setting up your character and going to the Lonely Troll to buy items from Calm. And you could probably already tell just after this 1 character creation, there are so many possibilities. There's so many other trappings that you could have access to, so many different race, class, and familiar combinations that will end up with different amounts of health and grit and starting, rations and gold, what gear you start with, what skills you start with, what skills you're proficient in, your special abilities on your your race and your familiar, how much extra damage you can do on your class cards. There's just so much variation to the characters. So, so go nuts with that, playing all kinds of different characters and trying out different character combinations and seeing, what you enjoy the best. So cool. So that's it for the character creation section. Now we're going to go into talking about exploration. So this is like a core fundamental mechanic in the game is the exploration. The game is going to see you going through a dungeon that you're going to use this dungeon deck here to explore. Now the way it works is pretty interesting. I'll also mention too that if any of you guys are familiar with the game Iron Helm, UnderQuest is essentially a spiritual successor to Iron Helm, so you might notice some of the mechanics are similar and carry over from Underhelm into into UnderQuest. I kind of like to look at it sort of like a video game, where it's like you've got the first iteration and then there's a sequel. So there's plenty enough here that is way different than Iron Helm, but it shares some of the same roots. So you'll see some mechanics that are sort of similar. Cool. So we're going to go over the exploration now. So what you do is you're going to take the top 2 cards of the dungeon deck and you're going to set them off to the side like so. You're going to want to make sure that you have a space for a discard pile on the left side of the dungeon deck. And then you're going to get to decide which of these 2 cards you want to flip over. Now, before we go into flipping these cards over, it's important to talk about the different types of cards in the dungeon deck so that you know how to resolve them once you flip them over. So let's go ahead and chat about those. There's essentially 2 different types of cards that you want to really keep in mind. One of them will be sort of like the altar here. And you know what? Actually, what we're going to do is I'm going to separate all of them out so that you guys can actually see what each of them are, like so. So you can get a really good visual representation of it. So we've got all of these cards over here, and then we've got these remaining 6 cards over here. Now, what makes them different is these cards over here, they don't have numbers on them. So you'll notice on these cards, they all have a little purple circle with a 1 or a 2 in it. You'll see all of these cards have that. So that's what makes these different, and it determines on how you resolve the card. Now, if you resolve one of these cards that don't have the numbers on them, you'll simply read the card and it'll basically just give you one option, or not even really an option. It's only one thing that you can resolve. So it's not much of an option. You just go ahead and resolve that one thing that the card tells you to do. And if you draw and resolve one of these cards that has the 1 or a 2, it's gonna matter if you resolve it as the first card or the second card. So if you resolve it as the first card, you'll do what it says next to the number 1. You'll resolve that portion of the card. If you push your luck into the card, which I'll show you here in a moment, then you'll resolve the second half of the card if you resolve it as the second card. So let me go ahead and mix these back up, and then I'll show you in a little example here how that actually works so it makes more sense. So let's get these mixed up. There we go. We'll place these here. So then you'll place 2 cards off to the side. And let's go ahead and flip this one. We'll go to door number 1. So in this case, we got a skirmish. So you'll go ahead and read the first option here since we're flipping this as the first card. It says, you draw your weapon and square off against your foe, draw an enemy card and add double the dungeon level to their health. So let's say in this case, you're like, yeah, you know what? I want to do that. You would go ahead and resolve the card. So you would draw an enemy card, you would add double the dungeon level to their health, and then you would go through with combat, which we're going to get into here soon enough. And then if you decide to do that, you would take this card, you would place it out onto what's called the tableau. So you're going to create a tableau as you adventure through the game. Then you would take the other card that you decided not to go to. You do not look at it. You leave it face down, and then you discard it face down off to the side in this pile. And then you would take the next 2 cards and you would do that again. But let's say in that instance, in that first example, let's say that you flipped over the skirmish and you don't want to do the skirmish. Let's say you want to push your luck. So what you would do is you would take the skirmish, you would discard it face down into the discard pile, and then you would flip over the other card. And now, since we got one of these cards that has the 1 and the 2 on it, since we're resolving this card as the second card, since we pushed our luck into it, you would resolve the number 2 portion of the card. And in this case, it's an ambush, and our foe would catch us by surprise and get to ambush us, which is pretty gnarly. So that's how you would resolve that. Let's say, for instance, that we had one of the other types of cards, like the merchant. So let's say that we had this similar example here, and we have the top 2 dungeon cards, and let's say that we flip this one, and we've got the merchant. And let's say that we want to do the merchant card. You would simply read the merchant, you'd go ahead and resolve the card, and when you're done, you'd put it on the tableau, and you take this other card and discard it off to the side. whichever card you decide to resolve, it always goes out onto the tableau. But let's say that you don't want to go to the merchant and you want to push your luck. You would take it, set it face down over here in the discard pile, you'd flip the second card, and then you'd have to resolve, in this case, the number 2 here. The second section of the skirmish card. Let's say that you flipped the skirmish card and wanted to push your luck past it, and you flip into the merchant. You just resolve it the same way as you would as if you had drawn it as the first card. So whether you draw it as the first or the second card, it doesn't matter. You just resolve it the same way because it doesn't have the 1 or a 2. So that's how exploration works. And again, whichever one you decide to resolve will go out on the tableau. You'll continue your way through the deck, deciding which cards you want to resolve and which cards you want to push your luck past. Let's say we push our luck. We'd go into a clearing. Since we're resolving it as the second card, we would have to read what's next to the number 2, and then we would go ahead and resolve the card, and we'd put it out on the tableau. Now, the point of putting these cards out on the tableau is a really, really cool mechanic, and it's actually a driving mechanic of the game because it's going to tie into your quest cards. Now, of course, before you go out and explore, I got a little ahead of myself. You're going to want to read your first quest. So before you get into this exploration portion of the game, you're always going to read your quest card. So you'll notice on the quest card, it'll have a title of the quest card. Then they'll have a top half of the card. They'll have 3 icons in the center, and then they'll have this bottom section of text on the card. You'll always want to start by reading this top section of the card and then stop. Once you get done with this, you'll take note of the 3 different quest tokens here. In this case, Wealth, Combat, and Mystic. And of course, those pertain to these tokens up this way, and they're also printed on your mat here. You're not going to want to read this second half of the card until you acquire one of each of those particular quest tokens, in which case the quest would be completed, and then you can read the bottom section of the card, which will typically give you some sort of reward or have you meet up with a companion that you can bring along with you, and then it will send you on your way to the next quest. So once you get your character set up, always remember to read the quest card first so that you can know which of these quest tokens you're going after, which ties into this here with the exploration phase. So whenever you're putting your cards on the tableau here, you'll notice that there is half of a quest token icon on each of the cards here, on each side of the card. Now, you're trying to connect those icons. So in this instance, we've got a Wealth quest token that's matching up with a Mystic quest token. Well, those don't match. Those icons don't match. Same thing if we were to swap it around and put it here. The Nature and Wealth quest tokens don't match. We're trying to create matches. So as you go through the deck and you're flipping over cards and you're finding these icons on the cards, like in this instance, you could choose to either put it on the right side of the tableau, which will not make an icon, or you could put it on the left side of the tableau, and look at that. We've created a Mystic quest token. We've got both halves of the Mystic quest token. Once you create a full quest token, by lining up these 2 cards on the tableau, you can take the corresponding quest token and then set it over here on your mat. And again, once you get one of each of the 3 quest tokens that's printed on the quest, you can turn those quest tokens in order to complete the quest, in which case you would read the bottom half as mentioned, and then you would put this in a discard pile and flip over the next quest. And of course, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the goal is to get down all the way through all 6 of the quests and make it to the boss in order to defeat the boss and win the game. So that's essentially how the exploration mechanic in the game works. It's really cool. You're going to have this draw 2 and push your luck mechanic, followed by placing the cards in a tableau, of course. And then again, with the goal of creating quest tokens in order to complete quests and progress through the game like so. Another thing that's worth mentioning too about these quest tokens is that you can actually spend these quest tokens for experience points. So if you have a quest token and you don't necessarily want to use it, or for whatever reason you really want to get some extra XP, you can exchange 1 quest token for 1 experience point token. Cool. So once you get through the entire deck, you're going to keep going like this, flipping cards, pushing your luck, or deciding to resolve them. And eventually you're going to end up with 9 cards out on the tableau. So I'll just go ahead and put 9 cards out on the tableau. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 like so. So there's 18 cards in the dungeon deck. You're going to end up making 9 decisions, and you're going to have 9 cards out on the tableau. Once you've got the 9 cards out on the tableau and the dungeon deck is exhausted and the other 9 cards have been discarded, you have completed the level. So you're going to scoop up all of the cards on the tableau. You're going to shuffle them in with the discarded cards. That's going to form a new dungeon deck. And then you're going to have to feed your character. So in between each level, at the end of each level, you're going to have to eat a ration. So you'll feed your character one of your ration tokens. If you don't feed your character a ration, they're going to lose 3 health. So you'd have to discard 3 health tokens if you can't feed them. Also, if you happen to have a companion, which you're going to find in the rewards deck, let's go ahead and grab out a companion here. Let's say we've got Olive as our companion. You also will need to feed your companion as well. So you'll have to discard a second ration if you want to feed your companion. Now, you could choose, let's say in this instance, we only have the 1 ration. You could choose to feed your companion and then not feed yourself, but then you would take 3 damage. Or you could choose to feed yourself, but then not feed the companion. But if you don't feed your companion, then they'll leave you. So you'll have to take the companion card and put it back into the reward deck, and they just abandon your adventure, basically. So you have to keep in mind that you want to have enough rations on your character by the end of a level so that you can feed yourself, and if you have one, feed your companion as well. So the next thing you'll do is check to see how much poison you have. So if you have 2 poison tokens, for each 2 poison tokens you have on your character, you'll gain a 3rd poison token. You'll gain another poison token. So if you've got 2 poison, then you would gain 1. If you had 4 poison tokens, for every 2 that you have, you'd gain a poison. So you'd gain 2 poison tokens. So you'd have to get 2 more poison tokens. So yeah, each time you get to the end of the level, you really want to try to make sure you don't have much poison on you, because it's gonna accumulate. And then finally, the last thing you do is you're gonna take the level card, the level tracker card, and go down to the next level. So we would go from level 1 to level 2 in this case. Cool. So that's it. That's how you end the level. Very, very simple. You shuffle up the dungeon deck, you feed your character, you feed your companion with rations, you check to see how much poison you have. For each 2 poison you have, you gain an extra poison token, and then you take the level card and you go down to the next level. And that's it. And then you go to the next level and you repeat the process. Cool. So that's basically the exploration phase in a nutshell, guys. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about the quests a little bit here. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have 3 different quests for each of the different quests. So you've got 3 level 1s, 3 level 2s, 3 level 3s, and so on all the way through level 6. Each of these will have 3 different quest tokens that you're trying to gather. So let's say that you complete level 1, you'd read the second half of the card, you do whatever it says, and then you'd flip over the next card, and you would read the top half of the card and go out on the next quest, and you would try to accumulate those 3 quest tokens as well. And again, the ultimate goal is to get all the way through, all the way to quest number 6, in which case it will tell you to locate a particular boss card in the boss deck. As of right now in the base game, there are 3 bosses, and it's going to tell you to fight that boss. And if you manage to defeat the boss and reduce its health to 0, you win the game. If the boss manages to reduce your health to 0, you lose the game. And it's worth mentioning there are a few ways to lose the game, but only one way to win the game. The one way to win the game is what I just mentioned, completing all 6 quests and defeating the boss before the end of level 5. Otherwise, you run out of time. So that's one of the ways to lose, is if you don't reach the boss by the end of level 5 and defeat them, you run out of time and you lose the game. If you ever lose all of your health and you go down to 0 health, you lose the game. If your poison ever equals or exceeds the amount of health that you have, you also lose the game that way. And there's a couple other cards in the game. There's one in particular that comes to mind, which is the all-seeing eye, and no way. I swear I didn't set this up. That's perfect that it was literally right there. If you get really lucky, or really unlucky rather, there's an outcome that says immediately die, in which case you would lose the game. So there's some other little kind of, thematic neat ways too that you could potentially lose the game. But again, there's only one real way to win, and that is by defeating the boss. Cool. So now let's talk about stat checks. So I mentioned those earlier. As you go through the game, there's going to be different cards that tell you to make stat checks. Now, you're always trying to roll 7 or better. Just think lucky number 7. In order for a stat check to be successful, you need to roll a 7 or better. If you roll anything less than that, the stat check is a failure, in which case you typically suffer some kind of consequence or you don't get the bonus that you're going for rolling for that stat check. So the way the stat checks work is you'll roll 1d6 and you're going to add that particular stat to it. So let's get an example here. Let's say we had an enemy such as the Shade here that says before combat, make a mind check. If you fail, take 3 ice damage. So to make a mind check, any stat check in the game is either going to be agility, brawn, or mind. It'll be one of those 3 stats. You're going to roll a d6. We would roll. We got a 4. And then since we're making a mind check, we get to add our mind stat to it. So we've got a 2 plus the 4 is 6. Unfortunately, that's not 7. Again, you're trying to get lucky number 7 or better to succeed. So it says if you fail, you take 3 ice damage. So we would take 3 damage to our character, in which case we would take 3 of these tokens and discard them off to the side like so. And then we would go on with the game. So there's going to be all kinds of different stat checks that you're going to have to make in the game, whether it's enemies like the Shade that we just looked at, or certain encounter cards will ask you to make stat checks as well. And that's how you do it. You roll 1d6 and you add the particular stat to it. So if we were taking an agility, if we were having a roll for an agility check, we would get to add 3 to it because we've got 3 agility. Or if we rolled for a brawn check, we'd only get to add 1 to it. And again, you always are trying to aim for 7 or better in order to succeed your stat check. So pretty simple little mechanic there. It's also worth mentioning too that you can actually re-roll dice in the game, including stat checks. You can actually re-roll any die roll in the game, whether it's an attack, one of your attack rolls, an enemy's attack roll, a stat check, rolling for crafting a potion, which we're gonna discuss here later in the video. So any roll in the game can be re-rolled, but it comes at a cost. In order to re-roll any die roll in the game, you have to spend one of your grit tokens and gain a curse token. So you would place a curse token over here, in which case you get to re-roll. So in that example, I had rolled a 4 and got to add 2 to my mind check. Let's say I wanted to re-roll. I would discard a grit, I would gain a curse token, and I could go ahead and re-roll. Unfortunately, in this case, I rolled the same thing, so I failed. If I wanted to, I could re-roll again. I could spend another grit, I could gain another curse token, and I could roll again, and oh, I passed this time. We got the 5 plus the 2 is 7, so I would have passed the skill check and not taken the 3 ice damage from that Shade, but at the cost of 2 grit and 2 curse tokens. So you really need to weigh your options whenever you're deciding whether or not you want to re-roll in the game. It's a steep enough cost to where it prohibits you being able to just re-roll every roll in the game, which would kind of defeat the purpose of it. It would make the game trivial, but it's also not so prohibitive that, you can never re-roll anything. You're really going to want to save your re-rolls for the most impactful moments in the game, since it costs grit and you gain a curse token. And it's worth mentioning that the game comes with 5 of these curse tokens. And when you acquire all 5 of these curse tokens, you're going to gain a Scourge card. Now, these Scourges, they have some nasty effects. There are 7 different Scourges that come with the base game, and they give your character nasty effects. Like enfeeblement, it'll make your carry capacity 2 less. So instead of having 8 encumbrance, we'd have 6 encumbrance. In that case, if we had any items on us that brought us over that weight value, that encumbrance value, we'd have to drop them, which is really nasty. There's cards like Cocksure that will force you to resolve ambush and skirmish cards rather than being able to decide to skip them. It makes you get into fights constantly. So yeah, there's several of these. You don't want to get these. The Scourges are pretty gnarly. And again, you acquire those when you get 5 curse tokens. So the moment you acquire your 5th curse token, you discard all 5 of the curse tokens and draw a random Scourge. And then you can end up acquiring the curse tokens again. If you get 5 of them again, then you get another Scourge, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's important to mention as well. So you can re-roll, but again, it comes at the cost of grit, and you gain a curse token whenever you re-roll. So just keep that in mind whenever you're re-rolling. You don't want to go too crazy with it. And also, if you run out of grit, then you can't re-roll. You have to have at least 1 grit to spend in order to re-roll. Cool. So now let's go ahead and talk about the inventory a little bit. On the mat, it's pretty cool. You've got this big empty space down at the bottom that you can use to store all of your extra items in your inventory, and you can hold as many accessories as you want. So any of these items that have AS right there, it means it's an accessory. You can hold as many of those as you want. You can also hold weapons and armor in your inventory. You can hold any item in your inventory. And so, if you had like an extra weapon, you can keep that stashed away in your inventory. Of course, it's going to take up inventory space, and you'll track that over here on your encumbrance tracker. But yeah, you can have all of that in your inventory. Also, your trinkets and your ingredients, all of that will be stored in your inventory as well. It's also worth noting too that you cannot use certain items like crafting potions during combat, and we'll get into that soon. Whenever we go over combat, I'll kind of explain some of that in more detail. But yeah, the inventory you can store any items in, which is kind of cool because if you have multiple weapons, whenever you're in combat, we're going to discuss this soon when we get to the combat section, you can actually swap weapons back and forth from your hands into your inventory and then swap weapons from your inventory into your hands, which is really neat. You can also do that freely in between cards. So if you're not resolving a dungeon card, you can feel free to use any of the items in your inventory, craft potions, swap items out, swap armor out. But if you're in combat or if you're resolving a card, you can't swap your weapons and armor like in between. There's only one case where you can swap weapons, and that's at the start of combat, again, which I'll explain here soon enough. So let's go over crafting potions. Let's go ahead and talk about the potion crafting system in UnderQuest. It's basically an alchemy system where in Ironhelm, if you're familiar, there were potions. There was a potion deck. Now, there are still potions in the game, like the Godfrey Spirits and the Bitter Remedy, but they're mainly trappings cards that you'll find in the trappings deck. There's no longer a potion deck. Instead, there's an ingredients deck, and the ingredient deck has a bunch of, well, you guessed it, ingredients in it, like the fresh blood and the harpy fig. We've got all kinds of really cool ingredients in here. It reminds me of stuff that like a witch would put in like a witch's brew, you know what I mean? To make a potion, like a lizard's foot or a goblin's toe, a dusk beetle, a mermaid's tongue. There's like some really strange stuff in here, dude. A unicorn horn, a ogre's toenail. So lots of really, really cool thematic ingredients that you can find. And the way that these will work, again, I want to mention too that these have half of a weight, right? So each of these will weigh half. So for every 2 that you have, and also every 2 trinkets you have, it's worth 1 encumbrance, worth 1 weight. So let's go ahead and look at the anatomy of the ingredients card. So at the top of the card, it'll tell you the name of the card. It'll have a nice little artwork of the item that you have there, the ingredient. And then up at the top left, it'll have these little white pips. Now that's going to show you the difficulty level of the particular ingredient. In this case, for the harpy fig, it's got difficulty level 3. For the fresh blood, it's got difficulty level 2, and that's going to pertain to what you need to roll in order to craft the potion, which I'll explain in just a moment. And then down below, you'll see that it's got these 3 different sort of like lines on the card with some little icons on them. Now there are several different icons here, and I believe all of them are actually right here. So you'll have hearts that will show health. So if you're able to craft this particular potion, you'd get health back. The little green like teardrop or poison drop is for poison. You'll be able to remove that much poison if you craft the potion. The blue cross is for curses. You'll be able to remove that many of these curse tokens from your character if you craft the potion. The little mushroom is rations or food. So you gain that many ration tokens if you craft the potion. And then last but not least, you've got the purple icons here that are for your grit tokens, and you'll get that many grit back. You'll restore that many spent grit if you craft the potion. So those are the 5 different things that you can get. Health, poison removal, curse removal, rations, and grit. And then down below at the bottom in red text, it'll have a risk. And down below that in blue, it'll have a reward. And I'll explain how that works in just a moment. So let's go ahead and talk about crafting a potion and actually try to craft the potion. So let's get, we'll just go ahead and use these. We'll go ahead and use these. So you'll notice here, we've got these 3 red arrows on each side of the potion. Also worth mentioning too, you can currently, with the current rules in the game, in the base game, you can only use 2 ingredients to craft the potion. You can't take a 3rd ingredient and set it over here and try to craft the potion with 3 or more ingredients. It can only be 2. It has to be 2, exactly 2. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to line up symbols that are the same. So if we put them side by side like this, you'll notice none of them line up. We've got hearts with the mushroom, then we got the poison icon with the grit, and then we got the blue cross with the poison. None of those match up, so we can't successfully craft the potion if we leave the cards like this. But what you can do is you can shift the cards. So if we shift the cards like this, to where these 2 rows are lined up, you can see we've got a poison icon here and then 2 poison icons here. So those icons match. So we can craft a potion with these 2 items that will remove 3 poison, since there's 1 poison icon here and 2 over here. Now, for each space that you slide the cards, it's going to add 1 to the difficulty level. So since we're taking this card and sliding it down 1 to get these to line up, it's going to add 1 to the difficulty level. So then you look at the white pips that show the difficulty. So we've got 2 plus 3 is 5 plus 1, since we slid the card down 1 space, is 6. So the difficulty of the potion is 6, meaning we need to roll a 6 or better in order to successfully craft the potion. And the way you do that is you take 1d6, you roll it, and you add your mind stat to it. So let's go ahead and roll. And we rolled a 5. Cool. So we would add 5 plus our mind stat of 2 is 7. And the difficulty of the potion is 6. So we needed to roll 6 or better. In this case, we did. We succeeded. So we would be able to remove 3 poison tokens from our character. So if we had poison, we would remove those 3 poison tokens. You would take the 2 ingredients and you would discard them into a discard pile for the ingredients deck. Let's say that we had rolled a 1. If you roll a 1, you automatically fail. No matter what your extra stats are, you automatically fail if you roll a 1 when you're trying to craft a potion. And not only do you fail and you don't get the benefit of the potion, you also have to get one of these risks that's printed in red down at the bottom of the card. So you would take the 2 ingredients, you would mix them up, you would draw 1 at random, and you would suffer whatever the risk is. In this case, gain 1 curse token. Oof. So we would gain a curse token and add that to our character. And then you would take the 2 ingredients cards and you would discard them off to the side. If, conversely, you rolled a 6 when trying to craft the potion, you automatically succeed. And not only do you succeed and get the reward right here for crafting the potion, it's also considered an exquisite potion. So we would craft an exquisite version of the potion and you would get the blue reward from one of these cards. So rather than mixing them up and drawing 1 at random, in this case, you actually get to choose which reward you want. So for the fresh blood, it says you can keep one of the other ingredients used to craft this potion, meaning if I wanted to, I could keep the harpy fig and then just discard the fresh blood potion. Or with the harpy fig, it says gain 1 ration, which I would gain one of these ration tokens and add that over here to my character if I decided to do that. So rolling a 6 grants you an exquisite version of the potion where you get the reward in addition to whatever else you get from the potion normally. And if you roll a 1, it's an automatic fail. And anything else, again, you're just trying to roll equal to or higher than the difficulty level of the potion in order to get the benefits from it. It's also worth mentioning too that there are certain ingredients in here. I'm not sure if I'll be able to find one necessarily right now, but there are certain potions that if you line them up a particular way, that you could potentially get 2. Like, okay, for instance, like in this case, let's say we had these 2 ingredients, the fresh blood and the goblin's toe. If you slide them up like this, you'll notice that we're matching up the hearts on this row and the poison on this row. You don't get both. You've got to choose. So you would have to choose if you want to get the 4 health back or if you want to remove 2 poison. So that's important to note. You don't get both. You have to choose one or the other. Cool. So that is basically how the crafting system, the alchemy system works for potion crafting. It is extremely fun. I think it's honestly like my favorite part of the game. It is so fun, and it really rewards characters that have a high mind stat because your mind stat is what you add to your roll in order to try to craft those potions depending on the difficulty level of the potion. Also, as I mentioned a little bit ago, you can only craft potions in between cards. So if you're in combat or if you're resolving a dungeon card, you can't craft a potion. It's got to be in between resolving cards. So that is something to keep in mind. It works a little bit different for these potions like Godfrey's Spirits and Bitter Remedy. Cards like this, you actually can use during the resolution of cards or during combat. But crafting potions, you can't do that during combat or while you're resolving a card. It's got to be in between resolving dungeon cards. Cool. Now we're going to go through some of the other decks of cards here. We're going to talk about the treasures and the trappings next. So let's go ahead and take a peek at those. We're going to go over the anatomy of these cards. Actually, before we do that, guys, let's take a look at the reward cards. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the reward cards and we'll kind of go down the line here. So the reward cards, you never shuffle this deck of cards because typically you're going to be instructed by whether it be a quest card or an encounter card to go into the reward deck and to take out a very specific reward card from the deck. You'll never draw from this deck at random. So essentially these cards have similar stats to the cards that are on the treasure cards as well as the trinket cards as well. So it'll have the name of the card up at the top, and there are different cards you can get in here, guys. Like you can get companions. Let's go ahead and separate these out so that you guys can see what types of cards you can get. You can get companions, and you can also get items as well. So here are the 6 companions that you can get. You've got Olive, Itis, Pigman, Mildred, Borko, and Ziggy. And each of these will have different stats on them. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the anatomy of the card here. So we'll take a look at Olive. Of course, it'll have the name up at the top, have a nice little artwork of your particular companion, and then it's going to have how much extra damage they do. So you'll be able to add that damage to your rolls in combat. It'll tell you how much extra defense you get, which is how much damage you get to reduce or mitigate in combat for every hit you take from an enemy. And then it'll tell you how much extra encumbrance the companion will provide you. So like in the case of Olive here, she gives you 1 extra encumbrance. So we would get to, if we had Olive as a companion, increase our encumbrance by 1 and hold 1 more weight if we had her. Then down below, it's going to tell you a special ability that the companion has. And then in the bottom right, it's going to have a red die. And that's what you use this little mini red die for here. That's the morale of this particular companion. If their morale ever reaches 0, they abandon you. They get put back into the reward deck and they abandon your adventure. But you can keep them around by giving them particular items, which will be printed in the very bottom left underneath that red die icon. So in the case of Olive, for each ingredient that you give her, she will increase her encumbrance. She'll increase her morale rather by 1. So let's say she went down to 1 morale. If we gave her an ingredient card, let's say we still had our 2 ingredients from before, the harpy fig and what was it? It was a harpy fig and a fresh blood. It doesn't matter either way. Let's say these are the 2 that we had. If we gave her the harpy fig, we would get to increase her morale by 1. And then if we gave her the skinkling heart, we can increase it back up to 3. You can never increase their morale up above what they started with. So she's got 3 morale. So you're going to stay at 3 morale. You can never go higher than that whenever you're giving them items to increase their morale. And again, if they reach 0, they're going to flee and run away from you. And the way that they'll lose morale will be printed in red. So for instance, for Olive, it says Olive loses 1 morale every time you gain poison. So every time you gain poison, she's going to lose a morale. She doesn't like when you get poisoned. And again, to keep her around and raise her morale, you have to give her ingredients. Now, each of these characters will have different morale, different things that make them lose morale. Itis wants you to give her trinkets to increase her morale. She also has a different ability. She has different stats up here. And again, all of these will have their own unique stats, amount of morale and what makes them lose morale, essentially, and what items you can give them to make them stick around. So those are the 6 companion reward cards. And then the other reward cards are various things. You've got accessories like the conch shell, the crimson cloak, and the druid's ring, or the skeleton key, which will all have a gold value, a weight, a type of item that it is, in this case, an accessory for the skeleton key. And then it'll tell you what the card does down in the text box below. And of course, you keep these down in your inventory. You can also find weapons over here, like the Wolfsbane Blade, the Fire Wand, or the Ice Wand. And there's armor in the game, like the Sacred Armor right here. And again, you've got gold, the weight, where it goes on your body, what type of item it is, and then text in the card that you'll resolve. Also in the bottom left, it'll tell you what type of item it is, like armor or a weapon or an accessory like so. Cool. So those are the reward cards. Very, very cool. Very powerful cards. And then we've got the treasure cards. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the treasure cards. Very similar to the reward cards and the trappings that we've already seen. Some trappings down this way. You'll have a gold value, or first of all, you'll have the name of the card and an artwork. You'll have a gold value. That's how much this will cost at the merchant. So if you happen to run into the merchant card in the dungeon deck, he will have a number of treasures and ingredients available for you to buy. If you buy any of the treasures that he has available, it'll cost what it shows here for the gold value on the card. So in the case of the Floratome, it would cost 2 gold. And then it has the weight of the item, 1. It tells you the type of item. In this case, it's an accessory. It'll also tell you in the bottom left what type of item it is. So an accessory, a weapon, armor. And then it'll tell you what the item does in the text box. Fairly self-explanatory, fairly simple. And then you'll keep these in your inventory or attach them to your character, depending. Like if you get the leather armor, it's armor, it goes on your body. So you'd put that on your body slot. and you'd get to subtract 1 damage from all enemy attacks. It weighs 2, so you'd increase your encumbrance by 2, so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of different items in here, a bunch of different really powerful loot cards that you can find, and there's also a few cards that are kind of unique and special that we need to mention. So let me go ahead and grab those out. There are 3 in particular. One of them is the Arrow Trap, another is the Hidden Stash, and the other one is the Mimic. So it's important to note that if you go to the merchant and you're resolving the merchant, if you draw, now he tells you when you're buying from him, to see the merchant's stock, you draw 2 treasure and 2 ingredients cards, and ingredients cost 1 gold each. If you draw the Mimic, the Hidden Stash, or the Arrow Trap when drawing for those 2 treasure cards, he will not have those. He won't have them. So if you draw one of those cards, you simply discard it and then draw another card to replace it so that you end up with 2 treasures on the board. So for instance, just to make that perfectly clear, let's say we had this example. Let's say that we drew a treasure. He's got the Shard Axe, and then we drew the Mimic. He can't have the Mimic, so you'd have to discard it and then draw another card in its place, like so. Let's say that you drew another card and it was the Arrow Trap. He can't have that. If you drew another card and it was the Hidden Stash, he can't have that either. So you draw again until you get a second card to add to his stock there. So those 3 cards, the Mimic, Arrow Trap, and Hidden Stash, the merchant can never have. So that's important to mention. It's also worth mentioning too that if you encounter the Mimic, it just has 5 health. You'll never add the dungeon level to the health of the Mimic. So in all other instances, whenever you get into combat, which we'll look at here fairly soon, you would end up adding double the dungeon level to the health of the enemy, but you do not do that with the Mimic. He'll always just have 5 health whenever you fight the Mimic. So I believe that's really all there is to mention about these 3 cards in the treasure deck. Otherwise, you just resolve the cards as normal, but again, they mainly are special when they pertain to interacting with the merchant card in the dungeon deck. So just keep that in mind. So place that over that way. And I think that's great that it's like that in UnderQuest. It always kind of bothered me in Ironhelm whenever I would encounter the merchant and then I would flip over a Mimic and I'm just like, what? How did this guy have a Mimic this whole time and didn't realize it? Like, why didn't the Mimic attack that guy? You know what I mean? Why didn't he attack the merchant, but he's attacking me? So I think it's cool that if you draw the Mimic, it's like, no, he doesn't have that. It doesn't really make any sense. So yeah, so just keep that in mind whenever you're drawing those cards at the merchant. But other than that, we went over the treasure cards. Then we can take a look at we've already looked at the ingredients cards. Again, there's a bunch of different ingredients. We already checked those out. It's worth mentioning, like it even says on the merchant card, that these cards will cost 1 gold a piece at the merchant. So you can buy these for 1 gold a piece, but to sell them to the merchant, he'll give you 1 gold for 2 of them. So of course, so if you give him 2 ingredients, he'll give you a gold, but to buy them, it costs 1 gold per ingredient. So he's getting a little bit of a better deal there. So we've taken a good look at the ingredients. Now let's go ahead and look at the trinkets. So we've got some trinkets here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the anatomy of the trinket card. Again, you're going to have the name up at the top, a really cool little artwork, and then you're going to have how much gold the trinket is worth. Now, trinkets are so cool, man. They essentially act as gold, but they also have their own unique abilities and effects also. It's like gold that has their own unique effects. It's really cool. It's such a cool mechanic. So up in the top right, it'll have some white circles. That shows how much gold it's worth. So for the wand shaft, it's worth 1 gold. If we take a look at the raw amber, it's got two white circles, so it's worth 2 gold. The most expensive one that you can find is going to be worth 3 gold. There are a couple of them in here, like the ivory comb. It's worth 3 gold. Or I believe there's one other one. Yeah, the scrimshaw is worth 3 gold. So you'll just want to keep an eye on that whenever you're looking at how much the card is worth. So you have the name, the gold value, and then down at the bottom, it'll have what the card does. So there's all kinds of different stuff, guys. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just for instance, let's take a look at like the romantic poems. So it's worth 1 gold. So when you're at the merchant, you can use this as gold. When you're buying items, you could give him the romantic poems and it'll be the same as if you gave him 1 gold because it's worth a gold. Or if you gave him the ivory comb, it's like giving him 3 gold because it's worth 3 gold. It is so cool that you could use these trinkets to barter with the merchant. Also, you could use those back at the Lonely Troll in between adventures when you're bartering with Kalm. You could use those as gold instead, which we'll get to later on in the video. But yeah, check out like the romantic poems, for instance. It says, you may discard the romantic poems while resting at the campsite to gain 2 grit. So it's like, it's better than gold. It also has a secondary use, like this single use that you can use in order to, get certain perks in the game. Like in this case, if you're resting at the campsite, you can gain 2 grit. You read your romantic poems and it invigorates you and you gain some grit. And there's all kinds of items that do all sorts of different things. There's really unique ones like the wine bottle that says, if you encounter the Talking Dead, which is a particular card in the encounter deck, you may give the skeleton this empty bottle and you will not have to make a mind check. So there's a particular card in the encounter deck. It's right here. While it's very convenient, it's the Talking Dead, where you run into this little skeleton guy. And if you happen to have the wine bottle, you can offer him the wine bottle and you won't have to make his mind check that he otherwise, would have you make. So very, very cool. Very, very varied ways of using these trinkets, not only as gold or single use cards, but also in edge case scenarios, depending on encounters that you run into. And it just makes it so thematic and interesting that you're like, you're trekking through the dungeon, you got your wine bottle, and then you run into the skeleton and you could offer him this item. And it's so thematic. It's so cool. I really love it. And it creates these really interesting, unique narratives and plot points and moments in your adventures that all make them feel different and unique and send your character on their own little unique adventure. So the trinkets really play into that. Really, really cool stuff. There are a couple of them in here that I do want to mention in particular. So let me go ahead and grab those out. We'll put this one here. There's these, and there's this, and there's this. Okay, there's a few of them. I'll set the rest over this way. So we've got the marbles. Now, there's a green marble and a purple marble. Currently in the game, there's only these 2 different marbles. In future expansions for UnderQuest, there's going to be more different colored marbles that get added to the game. And they have a value. You'll notice they don't have any of the white circles up here in the top. It's because they're worth gold depending on how many different marbles you have in the set. So it'll tell you at the bottom, number of marbles in the set on the left side, and then the value on the right side. So if you've got 1 marble, it's worth 1 gold. If you have 2 marbles, they're worth 4 gold. If you have 3 marbles, they're worth 7 gold. And if you have 4 marbles, they're worth 10 gold. So the more marbles you have in a set, you can trade them away in a set, either to the merchant or to Callan at the Lonely Troll, and they'll be worth more gold the more marbles you have in the set. So again, as of right now, you can only collect the 2 marbles for a value of 4 gold, but there's going to be more marbles added in expansions. And they also have a bonus effect that says that you may discard this card to add 1 to your initiative roll before you roll in combat. So they also have a bonus right there. So that's how those work. That's how the value of the marbles works. And then you've got these cards right here. You've got the wand shaft, and you've got the amethyst and the raw amber. Now, if you look at the amethyst and the raw amber in red text down at the bottom, it's like for the amethyst, it says, item 1 of 2 required to create the Ice Wand reward card. Or for the raw amber, item 1 of 2 required to create the Fire Wand reward card. And then if you look at the wand shaft, item 2 of 2 required to create the Ice Wand reward card or the Fire Wand reward card. So let's say that you had the wand shaft and the raw amber. You can turn both of these in. You could go into the reward deck, and then you could search for the Fire Wand reward card and acquire it. Same thing if you had the amethyst and the wand shaft, you could turn those in and go through the deck, the reward deck, and get the Ice Wand reward card. So those are very, very interesting, unique trinkets, and the fact that you can combine them together in order to get reward cards. Really, really cool. And those are very powerful weapons as well. And then the last trinket that I want to mention is the Forgotten Note. It has no value. You'll notice it doesn't have any value printed up at the top. It doesn't have the little white circles. It's not worth anything. It even says this item has 0 value, but for some reason it brings you peace. You must spend 1 grit, which is this token here, in order to drop the Forgotten Note. And you must make room for it in your inventory to carry this card. So if you're ever at maximum carry capacity, you're holding as much as you can, and you draw the Forgotten Note trinket, you have to pick it up, which means that you would have to drop something in order to hold it. Because remember, even if you're maxed out, even though this doesn't technically weigh 1 on its own, it weighs half of a weight, you still can't pick it up. If you're maxed out encumbrance, you can't carry any more at all whatsoever. So you would have to actually drop something to make room for this. So this is just a hindrance. It's a nuisance. And in order to get rid of it, you've got to spend a grit token in order to discard it. So, and again, it has no value. So those are the kind of like special trinkets that I wanted to bring to your attention in the trinket deck. All the rest, they're worth a gold value, and they have their own little effects that you could use, like I explained moments ago. So then we're going to move on to the encounters, guys. So we've got a big deck of cards here. This is the biggest deck in the game. This is the encounters deck. There's a bunch of different encounters. If you're familiar with Ironhelm, there was a plot deck in Ironhelm. Encounters sort of take the place of plot cards in Ironhelm, and also the plot cards in that game served to progress you toward the boss. Once you got 10 icons, you reach the boss, but that's been replaced with the quest token mechanic, which we've already discussed in the exploration phase. So if we take a look at these encounter cards, they'll have the name of the card up at the top. Then they'll just have a line of text or a block of text here for you to read and resolve. So typically the part in white is sort of like the thematic narrative part of the card that's setting the scene. And then the text in red is the more mechanical, gamey part that tells you, what type of check you might need to make, what type of, check roll you need to make, or items that you might get, and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a bunch of these guys. There's so many of them to go through, so many different decisions to make. You can end up acquiring quest tokens from some of these. Some of these will give you different options you can take. So you can either choose to do the first one, or you can choose to do the second one. So it gives you a lot of decisions. There's ones where you might need to roll dice to see the outcome of the encounter. So yeah, a bunch of different encounters in here, and they also tie into the morality system in the game. So the game has a morality system, and there are certain cards in the game that will interact with that morality system. For instance, with the Pigman, if you free the Pigman, you could choose to free him and move up one space on the morality tracker, and you would gain the Pigman reward card. So if you chose to do that, you would increase your morality by 1 on the tracker. Or conversely, you could choose to cook the Pigman, and if you choose to eat the Pigman, you move down 2 spaces on the morality track, like so. But then you would gain a trinket and 2 rations. So you get to gain a trinket, presumably a trinket that the poor Pigman had on him that is now yours, and you'd gain 2 rations, which is also presumably the Pigman himself. You get some bacon that you could take with you in the form of two rations. And again, that's going to affect your placement on the morality track. Now, you might be wondering, well, what does that even matter? Well, there are several cards in the game. I'll mention just a couple of them here for the purposes of the tutorial. For instance, there's one called the Archangel. The Archangel says that if you have positive morality, you gain health equal to your placement on the morality tracker. If your morality is in the negative, you lose health equal to your placement on the morality tracker. So of course, if you've been a good person and your morality is positive, let's say we had 3 positive morality, you could gain 3 health back if you encounter the Archangel. But if you've been naughty and you're evil, let's say we had -3 morality and you run into the Archangel, you're going to lose 3 health. So typically, whenever you make moral decisions in the game, it might give you like a little minor reward, but then it'll pay off more later on down the road. Or if you make immoral or evil decisions, they'll typically give you more of like an instant boon or an instant reward, instant gratification, but it'll come at a cost later on down the road in the form of, cards like that, like running into the Archangel. Another good example for that I'll show you guys here is the Sacred Armor. So it says that it cannot be worn if you have 0 or less morality. So, and there are several cards like that in the game, several weapons and whatnot. So if you have 0 or less morality, you can't even wear the Sacred Armor. You're too evil to even be able to wear this. Also, in order to even gain the Sacred Armor, you have to encounter a particular card in the encounter deck called the Hallowed Armory. And it says that if your morality is 5 or higher, you gain the Sacred Armor reward card. So if you've been a good person throughout your adventure and you have your morality up to 5 or higher on the morality tracker, when you encounter this encounter card, you can go ahead and grab that Sacred Armor reward card, and it is the most powerful armor in the game. This is the best armor in the game. But you had to have made a bunch of good decisions up until that point. So they might have not given you big rewards at the time, but they really pay off later on down the road by rewarding you with something really powerful like the Sacred Armor, the best armor in the game. Or it says if your morality is in the negative, you have to make a mind check. And then if you fail the mind check, you gain a curse token, you gain a poison, and you lose a grit. So again, you might have taken that instant gratification at one point in the game to cook up the Pigman to gain a couple rations and a trinket, but at what cost? You might run into this card later on down the line, have negative morality, fail your mind check, and then you get a curse token, you get a poison, and you lose a grit. So the morality system is really, really neat, how it kind of factors into the game and sort of mimics real life. You know what I mean? So if you make good decisions, it ends up paying off in the long run. And if you take those instant gratification evil decisions, typically it's at your own detriment in the long run. So that's how the morality system works in the game. Very interesting, and just another layer added to the game, and something to keep in mind and keep track of as you're playing through the game. So those are the encounter cards. Awesome, very thematic. It adds a big story element to the game and really creates more of a narrative to the game in addition to the quest cards. And then you've got enemy cards here, guys. So we're going to take a peek at the enemy cards, and then once we go through the rest of the decks of cards, there's only a couple left to go through. We're going to discuss how the combat system works in the game. That'll be the last thing that we go over. So for the enemy cards, you're going to have the name of the enemy at the top. Of course, you'll have the artwork. You'll have the health of the enemy. That's how much health they're going to start with. You'll have how much extra damage they do. You'll have how much defense they have. They'll have a treasure class, whether it's A, B, or C. So when you defeat this enemy, in the case of the Shade, if you defeat the Shade, it's got a treasure class of A. You would consult the level tracker cards here, and you'll notice they have type A, type B, and type C. You would gain the loot that corresponds with the letter that's for the treasure type on the enemy. So the Shade has type A, so you gain type A, either a ration and a gold or one treasure. You'd get to decide which of those treasures you want to get, which of those rewards you want to get. And then finally in the bottom left here, it'll tell you the weakness, the type of magic damage that the enemy is weak to. There are 3 different types of magic damage in the game. There's fire, ice, and holy. If it's got a purple icon with a skull in it, that means that the enemy is weak to holy damage. If it has a blue icon with a snowflake in it, they're weak to ice damage. And if it has a orange icon with a fire in it, they're weak to fire damage. Dude, the cards are just lined up perfectly for me today. This is cool. This is really cool. I flipped the encounter deck over and like, boom, the card I'm looking for is right there. Same thing with these. All 3 were lined up perfectly. Very, very neat. Cool. So yeah, that's all the stats for the card there. And then in the bottom of the card, it'll tell you if it's in red, that'll typically be a check, a certain skill check that you need to make before combat. And if you fail, typically something bad will happen, like in the case of the Shade that we saw earlier. Before combat, you make a mind check, and if you fail, you take 3 ice damage. And then it'll tell you an ability that the enemy has. In the case of the Shade, when the Shade successfully hits, you gain 1 curse, meaning you would gain a curse token. In the bottom left, it'll have these little red 8-pointed stars here. That's how much experience points you gain. So you'll see they match these little red star tokens here. So if you defeat the Shade, you get 2 experience. So you would get 2 of these experience point tokens, and you get to add these over here to your character. And again, as I mentioned way back in the beginning of the video, you spend those experience point tokens in order to learn skills. It takes 6 of these in order to learn a skill that's within your proficiency, that's printed on your class card, and it takes 10 of these experience point tokens to learn a skill outside of your proficiency. And then in the bottom right, it'll tell you the initiative of the enemy. In the case of the Shade, it's got 8 initiative, and I'll get into all that in more detail with the enemies when we get into the combat section of the tutorial. Next up, we've got Abomination cards. So these Abomination cards are very interesting. If you flip them to the side, you'll see that there's a left side and a right side of the card. The left side is called the prefix side, and the right side is called the suffix side of the card. Now, certain cards in the dungeon deck, namely the Skirmish, Ambush, and Exalted Foe cards, will tell you to add these ambushes to enemies. So let's go ahead and take a look at those now. So we'll grab a Skirmish, we'll grab an Ambush, and we'll grab an Exalted Foe card. So these are the 3 different types of cards that are going to have you enter into combat: Skirmish, Ambush, and Exalted Foe. So we'll go over these one by one. So if you resolve the Ambush card as the first card, remember back to when I was talking about the exploration phase and you have your 2 cards laid out. If you're to flip over the Skirmish card and resolve it as the first card, it says to draw an enemy card and add double the dungeon level to their health. So in this instance, you draw an enemy. We've got the Wood Hag here. It's got 5 health. The dungeon level is 1. You double that, so it's 2, and you'd add that to the health of the Wood Hag. It would have 7 health. So then I would take my cube and set it to 7. So that's if you resolve it as the first card. If you resolve it as the second card, if you push your luck and you resolve the Skirmish as the second card, it says to draw an enemy and add double the dungeon level to their health, so the same as the first part. But it says, in addition, draw an Abomination card and apply the prefix to the enemy. So what you would do is you would draw your enemy. We've got the Wood Hag. It's got 5 health. We add double the dungeon level, so it's going to go up to 7 since double 1 is 2. And then it says to draw an Abomination card and apply the prefix to the enemy. So we would draw an Abomination. And again, you've got the prefix on the left and you've got the suffix on the right. So you would slide the card so that the suffix side goes underneath and you've only got the prefix side showing. And now you don't just have a wood hag, you've got an unholy wood hag, and it's going to gain some extra abilities over this way. So in white text up here, it'll typically give some sort of strength for the enemy. It'll give them like a buff basically. In this case, if an unholy enemy successfully hits, you gain a curse token. So that's pretty gnarly. But then in blue, it'll have sort of like a debuff for the enemy. If an unholy enemy misses in combat, they lose 2 health. So they get like a strength, a buff, and a debuff on these prefixes. And then down here in yellow text, it'll tell you the bonus reward that you get. If you defeat this enemy, you gain a bonus ingredient. So if you defeat this enemy, you get to draw an ingredient card in addition to your other rewards. So that's for the skirmish. Similarly, for the ambush, it says that you draw, if you resolve this as the first card, you draw an enemy card, add double the dungeon level to their health. So the same thing as the skirmish, but then it says you get to attack first. And then if you draw it as the second card, it's also similar to the skirmish. You draw an enemy card, you add double the dungeon level to their health. You draw an abomination card and add the prefix to the enemy. So again, you would draw the card, you'd slide it under, and you'd add the prefix portion to the enemy. But then it says the enemy attacks first. So the enemy would automatically attack first. And we'll get into that in more detail in the combat section. And then last but not least, you've got the Exalted Foe card. Now, this is a dreaded card. There's only one of these in the dungeon deck, and you don't want to run into this card. It says, before you stands a formidable foe, and there is no escape. You draw an enemy card, you add double the dungeon level to their health. So the same as the skirmish and the ambush. So we'd have the wood hag. It would have 7 health in this instance on level 1. Then it says, in addition, draw 2 abomination cards. Apply the prefix from the first card drawn and the suffix from the second card drawn to the enemy, and this card must be resolved if revealed. So normally when you have your 2 cards down here, if you have the Exalted Foe card, if you flip it as the first card, you must resolve it if revealed. You can't push your luck past it. You have to resolve it. And then obviously, if you push your luck into it and reveal it as the second card, well, you'd have to resolve it either way. So what you would do in this instance is you would draw 2 abomination cards. You would apply the prefix from the first card drawn, and then you would apply the suffix from the second card drawn. So you'd have an unholy wood hag of Molda, and you'll notice that on the suffix side, and this is the case for all of the abomination cards here, is that there's no blue text on the suffix side. So the enemy won't get a debuff on the suffix side. It'll just get an extra buff to the enemy. In the case of this one, enemies from the plane of Molda heal for D6 health if they miss in combat. So each time this wood hag would miss, she would get to roll and she would get to heal. In this case, she would heal 4 health. And then in yellow text, similarly to the prefix side of the abomination cards, you'll get an added bonus. If you defeat this enemy, you gain an additional experience point. It's worth mentioning too that all of the suffix sides of the cards all grant you an additional experience point, but the prefix sides all have different types of extra rewards that you can get. But the right side, the suffix side, the bonus will always be an extra experience point. Cool. So that's the way the abominations work. It's going to make all of the characters feel much more unique. And I believe, if I remember correctly, there's like over 1,600 combinations or something insane like that of enemies and abominations. So there are just a ton of enemies. You'd have to play the game like hundreds of times probably to even see all of the enemy and abomination combinations in the game. It is crazy. Very, very cool system. So that's how the abominations work to buff the enemies. And then we've got the Scourge cards that we've already talked about. Again, once you acquire 5 curse tokens, you'll discard those curse tokens and you'll draw one of these random Scourge cards, and they're all just gnarly. They give you debuffs and they just give you a hard time and make your day worse as you're making your way through the dungeon in UnderQuest. Cool. So that's all the main decks of cards there. Also over this way, we've got the boss cards, and they are very similar to the enemy cards. It'll have the name of the boss, the artwork for the boss. It'll have their health, how much extra damage they deal, how much defense they have, which is how much damage they're gonna mitigate from your attacks. It'll have a little asterisk here in the coin icon for what type of reward you get, because you're not going to get a type A, B, or C reward. When you defeat a boss, technically you beat the game. But if you decide that you want to continue your adventure with that same character and go into another dungeon, there are 2 particular special rewards that you'll get when you defeat a boss. One of them is you can choose to gain a treasure 2 ingredients and 2 gold. So that's one of your choices, a treasure card, 2 ingredients and 2 gold. Or you can choose to increase one of your stats, agility, brawn, or mind, by 1 point up to a maximum of 4. So these stats can never go above 4. So if we chose to upgrade our agility from 3 to 4, if we went through another adventure and defeated another boss, we couldn't decide to increase that agility stat from 4 up to 5. 4 is the max. But again, you could choose to increase one of your other stats if you wanted to, if it was not, already at 4. So those are the 2 rewards that you could choose whenever you defeat a boss. Also, it'll tell you what the enemy is weak to. And it'll tell you a skill check that you need to make, any kind of ability that the enemy has, that the boss has. It'll tell you how much experience points you gain. In the case of these bosses, they all grant you 4 experience points. And then it'll tell you their initiative in the bottom right, which of course is used to determine who goes first in combat, which we're going to get into here in just a moment. So I'll go ahead and set that off to the side over this way. We already went through the level trackers. We went through the quests. We've already seen the trappings. The next thing to look at is the skills. And I briefly mentioned this in the beginning of the game. There's different skills. You're going to have the name of the skill, the image for the skill, and then it'll tell you what the skill does. And you can keep your skills over here, and you'll just keep track of those like so. And you could have as many skills as you want. You can learn as many skills as you want, as long as you have the experience points to spend to learn those skills. And then of course in the bottom right, it'll tell you the type of skill that it is, whether it's agility, brawn, or mind. And of course that's used to determine how many experience points you need to spend to learn that skill, whether it's in your proficiency, 6 experience points, or out of your skill proficiency, 10 experience points spent to learn that skill. So that's how the skills work. Got those over that way. And the final deck of cards to go over, guys, are the incantations. So we've got incantations. Now, you can only learn these incantations, these spells, if you have a very particular skill. And we're going to go ahead and grab it out of the skill deck. So it is a mind skill. Let's go ahead and find those. So here it is. That skill is wizardry. So it says that you gain the ability to cast all level 1 incantations. You get to randomly draw 1 level 1 incantation to learn, and then look through the remaining level 1 incantations and choose a second one to learn. Also, it says that you may take a special meditate action at the campsite in lieu of any other actions. Spend 1 ration to reactivate a used incantation. We'll get into more detail about that in just a moment. Let me go ahead and get that card queued up for us. We're going to look for the campsite here. So we're going to take a look at that in just a moment, how that works. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at the incantations. So there are 2 types of incantations. There are level 1 incantations and there are level 2 incantations. Let's go ahead and take a look at the anatomy of an incantation card. You got the name of the card up at the top. You got an artwork for the incantation here. It's like a cool little stone with like an engraved symbol on it, a sigil on it. And then we've got the type of magic that this particular incantation falls into. There are 3 schools of magic, as I mentioned. There's holy magic, ice magic, and fire magic. So if it's got the little blue icon with the snowflake, it's ice magic. If it's got the orange with the fire, it's fire magic. And if it's got the purple with the skull, it is holy magic. And then up in the top right, it'll show you the level of this incantation. So this is a level 1 incantation. This is a level 1. And this is a level 1. These 3 incantations are the only 3 level 1 incantations in the game. All the rest are level 2. So you've got 3 level 2 ice incantations, 3 level 2 fire incantations, and 3 level 2 holy incantations. And also, other than denoting the level of the incantation, this also shows you how much grit you need to spend in order to cast the incantation. So level 1 incantations will require the cost of 1 grit to be spent in order to cast, and the level 2 incantations will have you spend 2 grit in order to cast them. Cool. And then down below, it'll tell you the effects of the incantation. Most of them will have an option or a couple of options for you to choose from. So in the case of the ice arrows, you can deal damage to an enemy equal to double your mind skill, or if the enemy is weak to ice, the damage is doubled. Or before rolling for initiative, you may slow your enemy by lowering their initiative by a sum equal to your mind skill. So as you can see, you could either deal damage with the ice arrows, or you could slow your enemy and freeze them with the ice arrows and hopefully get the jump on them in combat by slowing them and lowering their initiative. So a lot of these cards, same thing for the Magic Lantern. If you see an or in parentheses, that means it's got a couple of options for you to choose from. There are some of them like freeze that just have a single option, or blizzard only has 1, fireball only has 1, but a lot of them will give you options to choose from, which is really cool. So that's the way that these incantations function. So if you've got the wizardry skill, again, it says that you gain the ability to cast all level 1 incantations. So you get to randomly draw one level 1 incantation. So we're going to take the 3 level 1 incantations. We would mix them up. We would draw one at random. In this case, we would get Magic Lantern. We put that in our inventory. And then it says that you get to choose from one of the other 2 level incantations and choose one to learn. Let's just say we chose Mending Light. You'd put that over that way. And then Ice Arrows would go back into the incantation deck. Cool. And then it says that you may take a special meditate action at the campsite in lieu of any other actions, and you spend a ration to reactivate a used incantation. Now, that's pretty important because anytime that you use an incantation, let's say we wanted to use Mending Light. It says restore health equal to your mind skill +1. Our mind skill is 2, +1 would be 3, and it costs 1 grit. So let's say we spent the grit. Let's just say that we had taken some damage at this point in the game, and we want to use Mending Light, so we would gain 3 health. So we would take 3 of our health tokens, add it back to our health, and now this incantation has been used. It's been spent. So you'd have to flip the card over and place the card face down, showing that you've used that incantation. Now, in order to use it again, you have to do what's called reactivating it. And there are a few ways to reactivate incantations, and one of them is right here. So it says that you can take the special meditate action at the campsite in lieu of any other actions, meaning rather than choosing to cook, rest, or search while at the campsite, you would choose to meditate instead. And whenever you do so, you spend 1 ration to reactivate a used incantation. So in this case, if we had a ration and we wanted to, we could spend it when we resolved the campsite, and then we could reactivate a spent incantation, in this case, Mending Light, and we could get it back and then potentially use it again. So that's one of the ways that you can reactivate spent incantations. There's a couple other ways. One of the ways is that when you beat the game and you defeat the boss, if you choose to continue your adventure, all of your spent incantations get reactivated in between adventures, so that way you can use them on the next adventure. Also, there are certain cards in the game, like in particular, there's a Soar Tab encounter. Let's go ahead and find that real quick. Let's go ahead. Oh, it's right here. Cool. So one of the things that you could do at Soar Tab is recharge. You may reactivate a spent incantation. So there's other cards in the game like that will give you the option to, potentially reactivate a spent incantation. So those are the 3 ways. When you beat the game, you get all your incantations back. If you run into certain cards like Soar Tab, that'll give you the option to reactivate them. Or when you go to the campsite and you choose to meditate with the wizardry skill in lieu of one of the other options, you can reactivate a spent incantation that way as well. So yeah, really, really cool system with the spells, with the incantation and the spells. And essentially, once you learn wizardry, you can go into 3 different types of incantations, or 3 different types of schools of magic, rather, for the incantation deck. You can go into holy magic, fire magic, or ice magic, and you'll notice that on these cards in blue at the bottom, it'll say prerequisite. You must have the wizardry skill to learn this skill. So if any of the skills say prerequisite, it'll tell you what other skill you need to have before you're able to learn it. So you always have to start with wizardry first in order to learn it. It's also worth mentioning too that if you choose to be a conjurer as your class, like right here, you get to start with wizardry. So right out of the gate, you just get to start with the wizardry skill, which is really, really cool. Very, very fun to play with a conjurer. But if you don't choose a conjurer, you could still learn wizardry. So if your skill proficiency is mind, you could always learn the wizardry skill by discarding 6 experience point tokens and learning it. If your proficiency is not mind, if it's brawn or agility, you could still learn wizardry, but it'll cost you 10 experience points in order to learn it. And then, of course, whenever you want to learn the holy magic, fire magic, or ice magic, it'd be the same thing. You would spend your experience points in order to learn those skills. And they're pretty interesting. They're very similar to wizardry. So like if we take a look at holy magic, and this is going to be the same for fire magic and ice magic, it says gain the ability to cast all holy incantations. So same thing. This will be gain the ability to cast all fire magic incantations. This will say gain the ability to cast all ice magic incantations. And then it'll tell you to randomly draw 1 holy incantation to learn, and then look through the remaining holy incantations and choose a second one to learn. Same thing with fire. You'll draw a fire incantation to learn and then pick one. And then with ice magic, you'll draw a random ice magic and pick one. And in that scenario, whenever you do that, let's say that we wanted to learn, ice magic. We're going to go into ice magic. You would take all of the ice magic incantations, including the level 1 one that we didn't pick. You would shuffle all of those up. You'd pick one at random. In this case, we got ice arrows. And then you would pick a second one to learn. We'll just go with ice wall, and you'd get to learn that one as well. Cool. So that's how all those work, man. And again, you'll spend grit equal to the level of the incantation whenever you want to actually cast that particular incantation. Really, really cool. The spell system is absolutely amazing. It is so fun to use, and it is very, very, very powerful. And we're going to get into why it's so powerful here, because we're going into combat, guys. Or we're going to get into at least one of the reasons why magic incantations are so powerful, especially in combat. So we've covered most things so far, guys. Basically, all that's left is combat and what's going to happen at the end of the game. So let's go ahead and get into combat. Also, I just want to say at this point in the video, I know this is a very long video. There's a long tutorial, and I appreciate you guys being here and watching if you're still here. I hope you've enjoyed the video up to this point, and I hope it's helping you learn the game. Again, as I mentioned, there's no playthrough in this one, but the game is so dense and has so many rules in it and so many decks of cards and things to talk about that it deserves its own tutorial that just gets really down into the nitty gritty. So thank you guys for sticking around, and I hope this tutorial has been helpful so far. So let's go ahead and get into combat, dudes. This is the exciting part here. I mean, it's all exciting, but let's go ahead and get into combat now. So again, as I mentioned, there are going to be a few different cards that you can get to get into combat. The Exalted Foe, the Skirmish, and the Ambush. Cool. So let's go ahead and get into this, guys. So the first thing I want to talk about is actually, let me grab a card so that I can demonstrate this. We'll just grab the mace. We'll put that over this way, like so. Cool. So combat is interesting. We've got a lot to chat about here for combat. So, okay, let's start with the ambush card. Let's say that we get into combat and we've got the ambush card here. So if you resolve it as the first card, you're going to draw an enemy and add double the dungeon level to their health, and you get to attack first. So we would draw. We've got our good old pal, the Wood Hag here. We're going to add double the dungeon level to her health. So we're on level 1. Double that is 2. So we would add 2 to her 5 health, and she would have 7 health like so. Whenever you're resolving the ambush card as the first card, it says you get to attack first, which means we don't need to roll for initiative. We just automatically get to attack first. If you draw this as the second card, it's the same thing. You draw the enemy, you add double the dungeon level to their health, but then you would also add the prefix of an abomination card to the enemy, and then the enemy gets to attack first. So again, you don't roll for initiative. The enemy automatically gets to attack first. So that's what happens if you draw the ambush card. If you draw the skirmish or the exalted foe card, you're going to roll for initiative to determine who goes first in combat. And the way that works is you simply check the initiative of the enemy down in the bottom right. In the case of the Wood Hag, she has 6 initiative. So to determine who goes first you need to roll an initiative check before combat starts. So you roll 1d6. And then you add the value that you rolled to your agility. You get to take your agility stat. In this case, we've got 3 agility, and we get to add that to what we rolled. So we've got 3 plus 5 is 8. If you roll equal to or greater than the initiative of the enemy, you get to attack first. So as long as we roll 6 or better against the Wood Hag, since she has 6 initiative, we get to attack first in combat. If we would have rolled 5 or less, then we fail the initiative check, and the enemy, the Wood Hag, would get to attack us first in combat. So very simple. That's how initiative works. You always add your agility check to it, and you just roll 1 die and add the 2 together. Very, very simple. Cool. Also, it's worth mentioning too that at the start of combat, before you actually start rolling for attacks, you can decide to swap weapons. Now, I mentioned way earlier in the video that in between resolving cards, you can freely swap weapons back and forth. You can swap armor back and forth, and so on and so forth. But once combat starts, you can't swap weapons back and forth. The only time that you get to swap any of your items is weapons in particular. You could decide to swap a weapon in between. So let me actually grab a better weapon so that I can show why this would be useful. Let's grab the Amber Blade. Let's go ahead and find that. There we go. So the reason that you might want to swap weapons in combat at the start of combat is because enemies have weaknesses. They have weaknesses to certain types of magic damage. So the Wood Hag is weak to fire damage, and the Amber Blade here says that you add 3 damage to all successful attacks against enemies weak to fire. So enemies weak to fire, like the Wood Hag here, are going to take 3 extra damage. So we might want to swap the Amber Blade out for the Rusty Dagger so that we can deal some extra damage. But in order to do so, we need to make a weapon swap check, and that is going to depend on which of these 3 cards you happen to be resolving, whether it's the ambush, the skirmish, or the exalted foe. So let's go over one at a time. Let's start with the ambush, since this is the simplest one. If you resolve the ambush card as the first card and you're getting the jump on the enemy, you're ambushing the enemy, you can freely swap weapons before combat at the start of combat without making a weapon swap check. So if we resolve the ambush card as the first card, you think of it thematically, the Wood Hag has no clue that we're sneaking up on her and we're about to ambush her. So she has no clue what's about to happen. So we can freely sheathe our rusty dagger in our inventory and then pull out our amber blade and equip it and then ambush the Wood Hag. Don't have to make any kind of skill check in order to do so. Conversely, if you resolve the ambush card as the second card, the enemy is ambushing you. They're sneaking up on you. You're just chilling at your campfire. You're sitting there, maybe eating a ration. You're eating your pigman bacon from earlier. You have no clue this Wood Hag is sneaking up on you. So whenever the Wood Hag attacks you, all you can do is use whatever weapon you happen to have nearby or in your hand at the time to fight with, meaning you can't swap weapons at all. You don't have the option to even swap weapons at all. You're just stuck with whatever you're equipped with. So to quickly recap, if you resolve ambush as the first card, you can freely swap weapons all you want. If you resolve it as the second card, you can't swap weapons. You're stuck with whatever you have for that combat. In the case of the skirmish or the exalted foe card, depending, either of these, this works the same way, whether you're resolving the skirmish or the exalted foe. If you want to swap weapons at the start of combat, you need to make an agility check in order to do so. So what you would do is similar to when you're rolling for initiative. If you decide, you know what, I do want to swap weapons, I'm going to go ahead and roll. So you'd have to make an agility check. Now remember, all skill checks in the game, you're going for lucky number 7. So you need 7 or better. So we would roll. And in this case, we rolled a 1. It's also important to mention too. I failed to mention this earlier, and I'm glad that this came up so that I can mention this to you guys. Anytime you make a skill check, if you roll a 1, it's an automatic failure, no matter what. Even if you have gear or companions or whatever that add to your roll and bring it up to 7 or higher, if you roll a 1 on any skill check, an agility, brawn, or mind check, it's an automatic fail. You automatically fail. So in this case, we would automatically fail. Let's say that we rolled a 2, just for the purposes of this example. We would have 2 plus our 3 agility is 5. That's not 7, so we failed. So we don't get to swap weapons. Not only do we not get to swap weapons, the enemy has their initiative increased by 2. So you're going to you need to roll for swapping weapons before you roll for initiative in combat. It's going to be the first thing that you do. If you decide that you want to swap weapons, you'll do that first. So in this case, we wouldn't get to swap weapons. We would have to keep our rusty dagger. And then the Wood Hag gets +2 initiative and goes up to 8 initiative. Then you would roll for initiative and see if you're able to attack first. Let's say that we rolled a 4, for instance, and we wanted to swap weapons. We got 4 plus our 3 agility. Again, you're always adding your agility because this is an agility check that you make to swap weapons. We got 7. 4 plus 3 is 7. Again, you need 7 or higher on a skill check. So we succeed. So we'd be able to swap out a rusty dagger for amber blade. And now we're ready to lay into this Wood Hag and deal 3 extra fire damage to her each turn, every hit, since she's weak to fire. And again, that's going to go for all the enemies in the game. They'll be weak to different types of magic damage. So depending on what weapons you have, you might want to swap those out depending on which enemy you're fighting. So again, a very, very quick little recap. If you resolve the ambush, I know I'm repeating myself here, guys, but I really want to make sure that you guys get this. If you resolve the ambush card as the first card, you can freely swap weapons. If you resolve it as the second card, you can't swap weapons. If you resolve the skirmish, either as the first or second, or if you resolve the exalted foe card, you can choose to swap weapons at the beginning of combat, but you have to make an agility check in order to do so. If you succeed and roll 7 or higher agility check, you can freely swap your weapon. If you fail, you can't swap your weapon, and the enemy adds 2 to their initiative. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. So that's how the weapon swapping mechanic works in combat. Cool. So then what you would do once you decide whether or not you want to swap weapons, and of course you don't have to swap weapons, you could choose not to, then you roll for initiative, then you'll set up the enemy's health, and then you're going to get into attacking. So let's say that we get to attack first. We're going to go over how the player attacks, how you calculate damage against the enemy for the player attacks, and then we'll talk about the damage that the enemy deals and how they roll their attacks. So for the player, what you're going to do is before you even roll, you're going to decide if you want to add any extra damage to your attack. And the way that you do this is we're going way back to the beginning of the video when I mentioned the class cards having these 3 icons on them. So in the case of the Scoundrel, if we spend 1 grit, we can add 3 damage to our attack. If we spend 2 grit, we can add 4 damage. And if we spend 3 grit, we can add 6 damage to our attack. So let's just say in this instance, I wanted to spend all 3 grit. So I like to drop my grit tokens over by the enemy just as a visual representation. You don't have to do that. It's just something I personally like to do so I can keep track. Because I've got a goldfish memory, as a lot of you guys that are familiar with the channel know. So if I just put these over here in this pile, I'll forget. I'll be like, wait, did I spend grit to add damage? I won't remember. So I like to put them here. So what you would do is we would get to add 6 to our damage. Now that's not all, guys. So as I mentioned also way back in the beginning of the video, you'll notice that on your weapon cards down in the bottom right, it'll have a stat. The Rusty Dagger is very special and unique in the case that it has 2 stats. It says agility and brawn. So that means it's an agility weapon and a brawn weapon. So you can add damage to your attack equal to that stat. So we've got agility and brawn. Our brawn is only 1. I don't want to add my brawn stat, but our agility is 3. So we can add 3 to our attack. So I'm going to take this little clear cube and I'm going to set it to the 3 on our normal damage up here on our tracker. So that way I can easily glance over here and know that whenever I'm using the Rusty Dagger, because it's got the brawn stat, or I'm sorry, the agility stat, and our agility is 3, I get to add 3 damage to all of my attacks. So we're going to add 3 plus 6, since we're spending 3 grit to add 6 damage, which is a total of 9. So we get to add 9 damage. Now what you're going to do is take both of the dice and you're going to roll. And what you're going to do is you're going to subtract the lower number from the higher number. So we've got 5 and 4. So 5 minus 4 is 1. So we do 1 damage plus the 9 extra damage that we dealt. The 3 from our agility-based weapon and the 6 for spending the 3 grit to deal 6 extra damage for a total of 10 damage. Then you would check the blue shield defense icon on the enemy and you would subtract that from the damage. In this case, the Wood Hag has defense of 0, so she doesn't stop any of her damage. So we're going to deal 10 damage to the Wood Hag, and in this case, she's only got 7 health, so she would be dead. We would completely clobber the Wood Hag and take her out in this example. If you ever roll doubles, like if you roll 2 5s, for instance, you always subtract the dice from one another, but 5 minus 5 is 0, which means you miss. So you completely miss. You don't get to add your extra damage to 0 and still deal 9 damage. If you ever roll doubles, you completely miss. All the damage is wasted and you can't deal any damage. And then it'd be the enemy's turn. Typically, these are going to be times when you're going to want to spend a grit and gain a curse token in order to re-roll in cases where you really need to get that hit in on the enemy. Not always, of course, and you're going to be limited by the amount of grit you have. And also, you're going to be deterred a little bit from re-rolling too much because you gain a curse token every time you do it. And remember, when you gain 5 of those, you discard them to gain a Scourge, and you don't want to get too many of those. So that's the way that works. If the enemy was still alive, they would get to retaliate against you and they would get to attack you. So, or of course, if they attack first, obviously they would get to attack. So let's go over how that's going to work for the enemy. Also briefly, I do want to mention too, let's say in this instance that we had the Amber Blade equipped. You would also add your magic damage to the attack. So let's use the same example that we just used. Let's say that we spent the 3 grit. Dude, we're going to freaking decimate this Wood Hag. So we would spend the 3 grit. So we're doing 6 extra damage. Plus we're doing 3 damage. Plus you get to add 3 damage to all successful attacks against enemies weak to fire with the Amber Blade. So I would take another clear cube and I would put it on the 3 on the fire damage section so I could easily glance over and know, oh, I can do 3 fire damage whenever I have this weapon equipped. If you ever swap your weapons out back and forth, you could always just, I guess, leave these cubes here, but you might want to just remove them so that when you glance over there, you're not accidentally adding damage that you shouldn't be doing. But that's easy enough to keep track of. So in this instance, we would deal 3 plus 6 plus 1, because 5 minus 4 is 1, is 10. She's got 0 defense, so she would take 10 damage. And we're dealing 3 fire damage because she's weak to fire. So she would take 13 total damage. But it's important to note that you want to calculate your physical normal damage separate from your magic damage, because magic damage cannot be mitigated by armor. So go ahead and add up your physical damage first and subtract the defense and then add the magic damage. And you know what, if I'm being honest with you, it's going to factor out to the same number either way. So either way, I guess it doesn't really matter, but that's how I like to do it. I just go ahead and factor in the physical damage first, and then I do the magic damage second. It's just, I guess, safe to do it that way in case there's ever anything added to the game in the future that might throw that off a little bit. But anyways, so keep that in mind. Also, it's worth mentioning too, if you fight against an enemy that's not weak to the particular magic damage, let's say that we were fighting a shade, and we had the Amber Blade. The Shade is weak to holy damage. He's not weak to fire damage. So it wouldn't take 3 extra damage. It wouldn't take the 3 extra fire damage. The Amber Blade only does 3 extra damage to enemies weak to fire. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, magic damage, whether it's holy, ice, or fire, ignores enemy defense. But normal physical damage, their defense will get subtracted from it. So let's use this as a second example. If we were fighting the Shade in the same instance, we spent our 3 grit to do 6 extra damage. We're doing 3 damage since we're using or in this case, we're using a brawn weapon. So I actually goofed up a little bit there. You gotta keep an eye on this. If you've got a brawn weapon, we only have 1 brawn. So we're only adding 1 to our damage. So we have to keep that, we have to take account of that. So we would do 1 extra damage plus 6 would be 7, plus our 1 from our roll would be 8. And then it's got a defense of 2. So 8 minus 2 is 6. So we would only do 6 damage. And then we are hitting it with the Amber Blade that does 3 extra damage against enemies weak to fire, but it's not weak to fire. It's weak to holy damage. So in this case, the Shade would take 6 damage and so on and so forth. So that's how that works. And then the way that it works for the enemy attacks is very, very similar. The enemy will roll 2 dice. You will subtract the lower number from the higher number. So 4 minus 3 is 1. And then you would check this little gray 8-pointed star right here, and you would add that number to the damage. So it's going to do 1 plus 1 in the case of the Shade is 2. So it would do 2 damage. Then if you had any armor that was mitigating any damage, you would subtract that from the total. So let's go ahead and in this instance, we don't have any armor on, so we would take 2 damage. So you would take your 2 health tokens and you would remove them. Let's say, for instance, though, that we had the leather armor equipped. The leather armor says that you subtract 1 damage from all enemy attacks. So I'd take a clear cube, I'd set it on the 1 next to our little shield armor icon. So then I can glance over and easily know. So I see the Shade is doing 4 minus 3 is 1 damage, plus 1 extra damage is 2 damage, minus 1 is 1. So I'd only take 1 damage. If the enemy deals magic damage, which it'll tell you down in this text box down here, if it does holy, fire, or ice damage, you do not get to mitigate any of that damage with your armor. You would take the full amount of damage. So for instance, if you're fighting a Balakor, which is right here, the Balakor says that when the Balakor successfully hits, you take an additional 3 ice damage. You would not factor in your armor for that. You would take 3 ice damage. So in this instance, let's say the Balakor rolled a 4 and a 3. So it's dealing 1 because 4 minus 3 is 1. Plus 2 would be 3 damage. Minus 1, because we've got armor, would be 2. So we would take 2 damage. And then we would take an additional 3 ice damage because he successfully hit us. So we would take 3 extra ice damage and we would not get to block it with our armor. It's also important to note too, that whenever you're fighting these enemies and they deal damage to you, whether it's, ice, holy, or fire, you, again, like I said, you can't block it with your normal armor, but there are certain items in the game that will be able to mitigate fire, ice, and holy damage. So just keep that in mind. There are certain cards in the reward deck or in the treasure deck or trappings deck that will allow you to defend against those. So, just keep that in mind. You want to factor those in because there's no place for those defenses on the card. So you'll just have to remember if you have those equipped in your inventory. Cool. So we'll put this back over this way. And essentially, you're going to fight the enemy back and forth like that, attacking back and forth. And if you bring the enemy's health down to 0, you've defeated the enemy. And if they bring your health down to 0, you lose the game. So if you happen to defeat the enemy, you're going to get some rewards for doing so. So that's when you'll check the treasure class of the enemy right here. In this case, it's type A for the Balakor. You'll look at the current level tracker card and you'll gain that particular loot from the card. Typically, it'll give you a choice. Like type A, you gain a ration and 1 gold or 1 treasure card. It's up to you. And then you would also gain a number of experience points equal to the amount printed down in the bottom left of the card. In this instance, for the Balakor, you would gain 2 experience points. So you take 2 of these experience point tokens and you get to add them over here. And again, for the umpteenth time, you use those to learn skills. Cool. So that's the combat in a nutshell. Also, you might be wondering, well, what happened to the incantations? You said that they came into play in combat. They do. And this is why incantations are very powerful in combat. So like I mentioned with the magic damage from weapons, magic damage from weapons will only deal that type of magic damage to enemies that are weak to it. So like with the Amber Blade, it deals fire damage. The Balakor is weak to fire damage. So you would deal extra damage to the Balakor with the Amber Blade. But like I mentioned with the Shade is weak to holy damage, not fire. So you wouldn't deal the extra damage, the magic damage to the Shade, since you're dealing fire damage with the Amber Blade. But with incantations, like let's look at ice arrows, for instance. If you use ice arrows and you do the first choice, deal damage to an enemy equal to double your mind skill. If the enemy is weak to ice, the damage is doubled. So you're dealing ice damage because this is an ice incantation, but the enemy doesn't have to be weak to it for you to deal the damage. So deal damage to an enemy equal to double your mind skill. Our mind skill is 2, double that is 4. So we would deal 4 damage, 4 magic damage, let's say to the Shade in this case, even though it's not weak to ice. We still deal the 4 magic damage to it, and it can't block it because magic damage is unblockable. You don't factor in normal defense for it. So its 2 defense wouldn't get subtracted from it. We would deal the full 4 ice damage to it. But then the awesome thing about incantations on top of that is that not only do they ignore the weakness type, if the enemy happens to be weak to that magic damage type, the damage is doubled. So if we were fighting, let's say, the Consuming Mass here, the Consuming Mass is weak to ice. So we would get to deal double our mind skill. 2 doubled is 4. And since it's weak to ice and we're hitting it with ice magic, you would double that. So we would hit it for 8 damage at the cost of 1 grit. It costs us 3 grit just to do 6 damage with our Scoundrel to do 6 extra damage. And that could be blocked by defense. So with this magic damage, not only are you dealing a ton of damage for much less grit, it's also unblockable. It is really, really strong. And of course, it's balanced out by the fact that once you use the incantation, it gets spent. And then you have to reactivate it by, doing one of the 3 methods I talked about earlier, either reactivating them all at the end of the game, meditating at the campsite by spending a ration and reactivating an incantation card, or by finding an encounter card like Sore Tab or otherwise that'll let you, there's also some reward cards like the Druid Rings that will let you reactivate an incantation once per dungeon level. But anyway, you get the point. They're very powerful, but you have to use them sort of sparingly because you can't just keep using them back to back over and over again like you can with grit. You can always spend grit as long as you have it. So very, very powerful how the incantations tie into the combat system. And of course, if you fight enemies that have abomination cards, once you defeat that enemy, not only will you gain the treasure class that they have from the level tracker card, in addition to the experience points, you'll also gain the bonus rewards from the yellow text that's printed on the prefix and suffix sides of those abomination cards. In the instance of this one, if you defeat this enemy, you gain a bonus trinket and a bonus gold. So you'd get to draw a trinket card. You'd also get to get a gold token and add that to your character as well. And then you also gain a bonus experience point for defeating that enemy with the suffix side of the card. So you gain a bonus experience. So, the more the abomination cards they have, the harder the enemy, but the more reward you'll get for defeating them, which is really cool. And then of course, once you defeat the enemy, you simply discard them and you continue on with your adventure. And that is basically combat in a nutshell, guys. So the very last thing to really talk about here is ending the game. And as I've mentioned a couple times, the goal of the game is to get through all 6 of the quests, get to the boss, and defeat the boss before the end of level 5. If you manage to do so, the game is over, you're victorious, and you win the game. And if you're unable to do so and you get all the way through the whole dungeon deck on level 5 of the dungeon, and you haven't completed all 6 quests and beaten the boss, then you lose the game. That's one of the ways that the game will end. And of course, I remembered or mentioned, you lose if your health reaches 0, if your poison is equal to or higher than, if it equals or exceeds your current health, you'll lose the game. If you run into instant death cards like the All-Seeing Eye, you'll lose the game. And again, if you run out of time, you lose the game. And the only way to win is defeating the boss, and that is it. And you'll get one of those 2 rewards that I mentioned earlier, either a treasure, 2 ingredients, and 2 gold, or increasing one of your stats by 1. And guys, I believe that is it, man. I think we did it. I think we did it, guys. I'm pretty sure we got through all of the rules of UnderQuest. If I missed anything or if you have any questions, be sure to post that down in the comments below. I guess you wouldn't know if I missed anything because I'm teaching you the game. But if you have any questions and you feel like I might have overlooked something or not explained something, please, ask away, ask your questions down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. One thing I do want to mention here is that this version of the game that you're seeing right here is I don't want to say a prototype. It's almost the final version of the game. There's just a couple of cards that I'm missing that you guys are going to get and that I'm actually going to be receiving here in the next week or so. And they are going to be on these tracker cards. There'll be a couple of these big tracker cards, and one of them is going to have an image that will tell you how to add hardcore modes or hardcore rules to the game. Now, I'm going to put up an image of that on the screen now, so you should be seeing that. I have the image of the card that Jason shared with me, and essentially you can implement these different hardcore modes. You can do one or two or as many as you want. You can do all of them if you want and implement them into the game on your first run or subsequent runs, however you see fit to make the game harder. So again, it is totally up to you. The sky's the limit. You could play it however you want. I'm just imagining off the top of my head, it might be cool like on your second adventure, if you defeat the boss in the first adventure, not only do you take the level tracker cards and flip them to their red side, maybe you choose one of those hardcore rules to add into the game. And then if you beat that second adventure and you go on a third adventure, maybe you add a second hardcore mode, rule into the game, and you can kind of like stack them up to add difficulty as you go along. Or you could just go completely nuts with it and go all out and try starting on the red side of the level trackers and adding all of the hardcore mode rules to the game and just go for like a mega hard mode run and see how far you can get in the game that way. So those are available for you to use if you want to spice up the game and add some difficulty. And as I mentioned earlier, the game was really fine-tuned and play-tested by myself and Jason to be primarily a single adventure playthrough. So the game is tuned and balanced really, really well for that first adventure. And then on your second adventure, if you don't incorporate any of those hardcore rules, the game will feel easier typically than on your first run. Which, some people might enjoy that. You might feel like, yeah, I earned this. I got my character built up and now I'm going to go through and I'm more powerful and, and go through the adventure that way. Or if you want to keep the game more of a challenge and kind of keep the game, pushing back against you, you can incorporate those hardcore mode rules into the game. So that's going to come with the final version of the game. Again, I don't currently have that as of right this moment, but I will soon enough. But again, you guys will be receiving that with your version of the game. All right, guys, so I had to edit this part of the video in because I forgot a couple of rules, so I'm going to edit this into the video here. There is a rule during combat that says that you can attack without a weapon. So if you want to do an unarmed attack, or in the the unfortunate scenario that you lose your primary weapon and you can't attack with the weapon, you could still perform an unarmed attack. And essentially the way it works is you can't spend any grit to do extra damage. You also don't add any extra damage from the stat type of your weapon because you're not using a weapon, obviously. So what you would do is you would roll 2d6, and it's just the same as normal. You subtract the lower number from the higher number. So like in this case, 3 minus 1 would be 2. So you would deal 2 damage. And if you roll doubles, you miss like normal. But what makes this a little bit different is that whenever you perform an unarmed attack without a weapon, the enemy's defense will not prevent the damage. So if we take a look at an enemy, for instance, like, let's see if we can get one that has some defense here, like the Shade. If you were to attack the Shade and we did 2 damage, we would still deal 2 damage to the Shade with an unarmed attack, even though it has 2 defense. You ignore their defense in that case. So that's one rule that I wanted to mention. And also, whenever you end the game, whenever you complete an adventure, you can continue your adventure. So what happens in that scenario is once you beat the boss and you want to continue your adventure on to the next playthrough, whenever you start the next game, of course, you would set everything up the same way as normal, except you would take the dungeon level cards here, you would flip them to their red side and set them up so you're going from level 1 all the way down through level 5 with your time was your real enemy card at the bottom there. And then you get to go to the Lonely Troll. And there's a couple of different things that you could do at the Lonely Troll. So first of all, what you're going to do is you're going to heal back to full health. So you'll get all of your health back. You'll also get all of your grit back. And if you have any poison tokens, you'll get to remove all of those poison tokens. So that always happens every time. You get full health, full grit, and you remove all of your poison. Then what you could do is you could visit Scarla, the cleric, at the Lonely Troll Inn, and she will cure you of curses and scourges. So if you have any of these curse tokens here, you can pay Scarla 1 gold per curse token that you want to remove. So if you happen to have, say, just one of these curse tokens and you want to spend 1 gold, you could remove it. If you had 3 curse tokens, you could give her 3 gold and she'll remove those curse tokens. So it's 1 gold per curse token that you remove. And also she will remove Scourges, which are these cards here, and that'll cost 3 gold per Scourge in order to remove. Again, just like the curses, you can remove multiple Scourges, but it'll cost you 3 gold per Scourge. So 1 gold per curse, 3 gold per Scourge. And then you can go to Kelm, and you could buy trappings from Kelm at the Lonely Troll again. And it works similarly to whenever you started your first adventure. You would simply shuffle up the trapping deck, and you would get 5 random trappings laid out like so. And these are going to be the items that Kelm has available in his shop currently. And again, you could spend gold. You can use any trinkets that you have available to buy trappings from him. You can also sell him trappings and treasure cards for 1 gold apiece. And in addition to that, he'll sell you rations for 1 gold apiece. So you can buy these rations for 1 gold apiece. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it during the playthrough, or during the tutorial here, but this is another rule, is that you can only eat rations whenever you're not in combat. So you can essentially eat rations at any time. You just can't eat them while you're in combat. And whenever you eat a ration, it's going to give you back a health and a grit. It'll always give you both of those, 1 health and 1 grit. Again, you just can't eat them while you're in combat. So those were the few rules that I wanted to that I wanted to go over that I missed. So we're going to jump back in. And it's also worth mentioning too that as of the time of this recording, the game hasn't released yet, but the crowd sale is launching on the 13th of January. So be sure to head over to thegamecrafter.com and jump on the crowd sale. And if you're watching this in the future, chances are you already have the game by now. So I hope you guys are enjoying the game, and I hope that this tutorial was helpful for you and answered any questions that you might have. Again, if you have any extra questions, or if there's anything that maybe I didn't explain well enough or I might have overlooked, and you've noticed, be sure to point those out down in the comments and ask me anything you need to know down in the comments below. Myself, and I'm sure Jason, will be scouring the comments as well to answer any of the questions that you guys have and help you guys out. So thank you guys so much for watching. I know this is a really long one, but again, like I mentioned, it's a very in-depth game. It's got a lot going on. It's fairly dense, and I wanted to make sure that I covered all of that in detail for you guys so that you know how to play the game. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, be sure to check out my actual playthroughs of the game so that you can see all of this in action, because it's one thing for me to kind of explain all of it individually in a vacuum, but to be able to see all of it combined together in motion and functioning and see all these rules playing out in real time, that'll really help you get a good idea of how the game is played. And keep in mind, I am human. I'm going to make mistakes in some of the playthroughs. So if you notice any mistakes, just refer to this video. Anything I've said in this video takes precedence. So I can even think in my head right now, there's been a couple times where I crafted potions while I was resolving a card, not in combat, but resolving a card. And I wasn't supposed to do that. And in the time, I just wasn't thinking about it. So I'm going to make, I make some little mistakes here and there in those playthroughs. But for the most part, I would say a good 95% of it is pretty much on point. So you'll get a good idea of how the game plays by checking out all of those playthroughs. And there's going to be plenty of playthroughs coming in the future, guys. I am going to play through probably every character combination at some point. So there's going to be dozens and dozens of videos to look forward to. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, this how to play video, be sure to hit the thumbs up like button. Also hit the red subscribe button to join the channel, and hit the bell so you can stay updated every time I upload a brand new video. And like I said, I'll have plenty of playthroughs of UnderQuest coming to the channel. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely subscribe and hit the bell so that you can be notified when those videos go live. Also, if you want to help support me and support what I do here on the Game Night YouTube channel, you can join the channel by becoming a channel member and hitting the join button down below the video. And there are a couple of tiers that you can choose from. You can either become a squire or a knight, and there's some cool different perks that come with both of those tiers, and you can be sure to check those out if you want to join the channel. Of course, it is not mandatory at all. I just enjoy you guys and appreciate you guys being here and watching the videos. But if you do want to show a little bit of extra love and extra support, I would greatly appreciate it, and you could do so by becoming a channel member. But thank you guys so much for everything, man. It has been an absolute pleasure and an absolute blast to work beside Jason to get the game where it is currently. I'm very excited about it. I know he is over the moon and excited about it as well, and we're both really pumped and excited to bring you guys some expansion content in the future. So as of now, just the base game of UnderQuest is coming out, but we will have expansion content for the game moving forward, and I will be bringing you guys tutorials and playthroughs for all of that content as well, so you could find all of that right here on the Game Night YouTube channel. This is going to be the #1 spot to find UnderQuest content. I love this game. It is just incredible. I'm going to be playing the heck out of it, and you guys can come along for the ride with me. So there it is, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, man, and until the next one, have a good one, and I'll see you guys in the next video.